The main character opened her eyes and found herself in a luxurious hall full of people. She saw before her a man in sacred robes who addressed her by the name of April Laban. With the power given to him by God, he wanted to announce her marriage, but the girl did not agree. The girl decided that the man had gone crazy because no one had the right to marry her to Kern Farkon. The main character immediately realized that she was in someone else's body because she remembered her past life perfectly. In her past life, the main character was faced with 800,000 won in debt from loans left behind by her ex-lover. She was reincarnated into another person's body due to an accident that happened to her on the Han River. The main character was reborn in the body of the antagonist April Laban from the novel I Love You, Mom, which she read shortly before her death. By an incredible coincidence, she was reborn at the very moment when April was getting married. The girl decided to prevent this marriage and declared that one cannot marry a dead person. The heroine demanded to know how they could allow a wedding based on a connection between souls. The man who was supposed to marry coughed awkwardly and asked the girl to shut up. He didn't understand what was happening, because before signing the documents, the main character was compliant. The man, too, was well aware of the unfortunate fact that the count was dead. He was very sorry, but nevertheless, there was no death certificate, and there was no funeral either. He wanted to explain this to the girl, but she said that this ritual would not resurrect the count in any case. After her impudent answer, the man looked down on her and asked why she was behaving like this right now, when almost everything was ready. He reminded the girl that she had already made an oath, and the main character had nothing to object to. Deciding to improvise, she declared that she had not said anything, and that the marriage was invalid because she had not signed it. She knew she was talking nonsense, but she still intended to get out of this situation at any cost, no matter what the method. The main character could not allow this marriage because she clearly remembered that it would be disastrous for April. Since her words did not have the desired effect, she decided to make a shocking statement. At the moment when the man wanted to put pressure on her again, she declared that she had broken her oath. With a determined expression on her face, she walked up close to the man and grabbed the contract from his hands. The girl wanted to take the document, but the archbishop had no intention of letting him go. The heroine looked at him with irritation and asked why he was behaving like this. The blonde couldn't understand why the archbishop was so stubborn, because she had made it clear that she didn't want to get married. The man replied that it was her own fault, since she was being stubborn for no reason. The heroine suggested that the man was not thinking clearly due to his age, and advised him to see a doctor. The man could no longer listen to the girl's lamentations about her difficult fate, and called the knights to help him. The archbishop asked Sir John and Emerlins to take the girl to her chambers because she was tired. The young men saw that the girl was full of strength, but they could not disobey the orders of their superiors. The man assured the main character with a smile that he would complete the ritual, and she did not need to worry about it. When the girl thought she couldn't get any angrier, the man addressed her as Countess Farkon. April understood perfectly well that the man was deliberately trying to irritate her by calling her by a different last name. The girl decided to try again to take the marriage contract away from him, but the man ignored her and turned away. Looking at her for the last time, the man smiled and congratulated the girl on her wedding. Since the heroine was held tightly by the knights, she was unable to move or fight back. The girl could only look in horror at the slowly retreating figure of the archbishop. Her head was spinning, and all she could think about was how to get the contract. April tried again to prove that the marriage was invalid, but eventually fatigue and stress took their toll and she passed out. After some time, the main character opened her eyes again and found herself lying on the sofa. Taking off the blanket, she rose from the sofa and began to look around, trying to understand where she had ended up. Suffering from a severe headache, the girl wondered how long she had been unconscious. The main character complained about poor health and suddenly saw a statue in front of her. The first thing the girl noticed was that the statue must have been very expensive. Since it was a statue of a goddess, the girl assumed that it was she who could have brought her into this world. The girl turned to the statue, begging it to tell the truth, but was met with only silence in response. The main character realized that she was having a meaningless internal dialogue and turned away. April hugged herself tightly and realized that only a madman would try to talk to a statue. The girl was an ordinary office worker, so it was difficult for her to understand why she ended up in this body. In her past life, she became a guarantor for a loan for her boyfriend, who was 8 years older than her. He ended up breaking her trust by disappearing and sending only a pathetic message on Messenger. After repeated visits from debt collectors, the girl could not stand the pressure and got drunk. Due to problems with coordination, the girl slipped on the wet floor and fell straight into the river. When the heroine had almost lost consciousness, she reached for the light. Finding herself in unfamiliar surroundings, the girl decided that this was life after death. For her, it was even better because now she could start life anew without debt. But she couldn't help but regret being reborn in April's body, as it made her life much more difficult. She remembered April's life from "I love you, Mom," which was quite difficult. April is sold by her stepfather and married to a dead count against her will. After the wedding, April begins dating different men, and in high society she begins to be called the virtuoso daughter of Vizcaya. Despite this, April was in love with only one man, the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince loved only one woman, his stepmother Elena, who was also the main character of the novel. The Crown Prince and Helena could not be together because she was married to his father. Lot decided to kill his father to take his place and imprison Helen in the castle. April, driven mad by jealousy, dies at the hands of Lot while trying to poison Helen. The main character was very upset by the fact that she had no luck even in her new life. She felt like a failure and saw no hope for the future. The girl was glad that she had arrived at a time when the events had not yet begun, but she had already been married off, and now she had to deal with this on her own. Crossing her arms over her chest, the main character realized that this all looked like a cruel joke. While the main character was trying to understand what went wrong, there was a knock on her door. While the main character was frowning at the door, the Archbishop entered her room without asking. The heroine was outraged by the fact that the Archbishop came in without asking and expressed her dissatisfaction to his face. The man looked at her cautiously and explained that he had come here to escort her. Realizing that she had already come to her senses, the Archbishop asked for forgiveness for his bad manners. The Archbishop was worried because the girl became ill during the ceremony, but now he was relieved to see that she was okay. April asked why he was there, and the man replied that he had come to inform her of the crew's arrival. She realized that he meant her husband's carriage, which would take her to the estate of her husband's parents. The blonde realized that she wouldn't stay here in any case and she needed to leave as soon as possible. Although she was not eager to meet her father-in-law, who wanted to deceive her, as he was very enterprising. The blonde was unhappy with the circumstances, but allowed the Archbishop to escort her to the carriage. They had been walking for some time, and the girl was wondering where they had parked the carriage when the heroine lost her balance. Somehow, as soon as the girl thought about how much her legs hurt, she immediately tripped. The girl closed her eyes and prepared herself for pain, but her fears were in vain. Someone grabbed the girl, and she looked at her savior in surprise. The girl looked at the top of the young man's head, and it seemed to her that she saw a halo. It turned out that it was just his hair, which shone and shimmered in the light, creating the impression of a halo. When the girl found herself in the arms of this man, she was able to take a good look at him. The main character had just come into this world, but this young man was the most handsome man she had ever seen. While they were looking at each other in bewilderment, the Archbishop and the maid brought them out of their stupor. The blonde immediately pushed the man away and apologized for the inconvenience. The heroine quickly explained that she almost fell because of her clumsiness, and without waiting for an answer, she moved on. The main character told the Archbishop that she would be embarrassed if he walked her home, and she would go there herself. At this time, the young man she bumped into was looking at his hand. The man knew he had done nothing wrong, but he still felt a strange feeling. The young man turned around to look at the girl leaving, and he himself could not understand what he was feeling. The last thing he saw before the girl disappeared completely were her golden curls. When the priest asked him what had happened, the man did not answer, continuing to look into the empty corridor. At the same time, the main character was about to get into the carriage, but she was stopped. The girl turned around with an irritated expression on her face and asked the Archbishop what he wanted from her. The man patiently explained to the main character that knights would escort her home. Having declared that they could do whatever they wanted, the heroine got into the carriage and loudly slammed the doors behind her. The coachman realized that he could now go and whip the horses. The main character was riding in a carriage for the first time and was unhappy with the fact that it was shaking so much. The girl couldn't help but think that this could be a sign of what her future life would be like. The only thing April was sure of was that right now, she really wanted a cup of iced coffee. When they finally arrived, the knight gave the girl his hand so she could get out of the carriage. The heroine sighed coldly, as if all this was unpleasant to her. She moved away from the young man and got out of the carriage without his help. Having climbed out of the carriage, the heroine felt a pain throughout her body and realized that there was not a single living place left on her. The heroine suggested that the reason could be the poor condition of the road or the inexperience of the coachman. Mentally indignant at the injustice, she looked at Count Farkin's mansion. Having carefully examined the house from afar, the girl decided that it looked rather gloomy and did not suit her at all. Seeing the expression on the lady's face, the young man who was next to her asked if something was bothering her. The main character shook her head and said that the house turned out to be even better than she imagined. She thought that if they could pay the dowry, they must have enough money, but the place looked unkempt and old. The blonde suggested that perhaps she was biased, and that this state of affairs was widespread. She decided not to lose hope, and first see how things were inside and then make a decision. But her enthusiasm did not last long because, although she was the new mistress of the estate, no one was there to greet her. The girl knew that according to the rules of etiquette, she should have been met by at least a butler and a manager, but they were not visible. Understanding the girl's plight, the church attendant offered to walk her to the entrance, but the heroine refused. Despite the young man's protests, the main character resolutely headed towards the entrance to the mansion. At that moment, a young man in a butler's suit came out of the mansion and, seeing the blonde, froze in place. The main character looked at him sternly and asked what he was waiting for. The man shuddered and looked questioningly at the main character, as if asking what she meant. The blonde folded her arms across her chest and said she was waiting for the man to open the door for her. April wondered if he had expected her to ring the doorbell, as if she were a guest rather than the mistress of the estate. The brown-haired man hurried to open the doors but then stopped and looked at the girl again. The blonde asked the brown-haired man why he looked at her so intently, and he, realizing his mistake, began to bow and apologize. When the brown-haired man almost called her madam, the heroine realized that all the servants already knew who she was. The heroine first thought that the servants did not know about her arrival, but when she realized that everyone already knew who she was overcome with anger and hatred. The blonde decided to watch how the servants would greet the guest, whom they considered to be the fictitious wife of their master. When the heroine entered, she noticed that the servants did not even try to hide their hostility towards her. The main character coldly stated that her name was April, and from now on she was Countess Farkin. To show that she didn't care about their attitude, the girl smiled. More accurately, she was going to do it, but her smile was too forced because she couldn't bring herself to smile sincerely due to anger. The residents of the estate, sensing the tense atmosphere, shuddered, realizing that she was angry. One of the maids looked at the man standing in the center of the room as if asking him for help. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, the man bowed and introduced himself to the main character. The dark-haired man turned out to be Count Farkin's chief butler, and his name was Gordon. Gordon wanted to continue his speech, but the main character interrupted him and said that she would meet everyone tomorrow. The girl spoke rudely on purpose, and the man flinched because he was surprised and annoyed by her words. The man wanted to say something, but the girl interrupted him again and explained that she was very tired and could not listen to him. April explained that even if she continued to listen to the names of all the workers, she still wouldn't remember anything. The faces of those gathered were lost, but the main character was not going to feel sorry for them, since she understood that they were not happy to see her, and she had no reason to try to please them. The main character looked at her nails with a critical eye and gave her first order to the butler. The girl asked to bring her dinner because she had not eaten all day and was hungry. When the heroine announced that she wished to take a bath after dinner, the butler gestured for the maid to follow her. The maid approached the blonde and said that she would take her to the restroom. The main character cast a fleeting glance at the maid and then allowed her to lead her away. She then looked at the staff and said that she wasn't feeling very well, so she asked them to hurry up with dinner. The heroine added that she was not in the mood today and they should not test her patience. As soon as she left, the residents of the estate breathed a sigh of relief because they felt a huge tension around her. The head maid also reported to the butler that her whole body felt numb while she was standing. When the man nodded, the head maid asked his opinion of the new mistress's character. The woman believed that honesty was the only way to get along with the girl. The butler agreed with the head maid and stated that this is exactly what they would do. The main character was already starting to lose patience when she was finally brought the promised dinner. The blonde did not fail to complain that she had been feeling very hungry all this time. The heroine's mood quickly deteriorated when she saw what they brought her for dinner. April was unpleasantly surprised to be served stale bread and couldn't believe that anyone wanted her to eat it for dinner. The heroine looked sternly at the maid who brought her stale bread, to which she bowed and asked forgiveness for her mistake. The blonde listened to the maid's explanation that this was all the bread they had, but still did not believe her, thinking that they were trying to humiliate her in this way. The main character, who had recently arrived at the mansion, was already very irritated by its staff. April decided to explain to the maid that she would now rule the mansion and that she needed to be obeyed. She wanted to scold the maid severely, but stopped when she saw that she was about to burst into tears. April couldn't believe that the girl was so naive and thought that she would forgive her for crying. April's words had the opposite effect, and instead of making the maid stop crying, they only made the situation worse. This time, the heroine decided to turn a blind eye to the situation and told the maid that she was only following orders and therefore was not to blame. She was about to ask the maid to leave, but at that moment she remembered another task. The girl asked if they had prepared a bath for her, but the maid replied that they only had cold water. The main character's psyche was already unstable, but the maid's words became the last straw. Her patience snapped and she screamed so loudly that the servants came running into her room. The butler was afraid that something had happened to her and without knocking burst into the room. As the butler wondered what had happened, he saw a very strange scene before his eyes. The man saw the blonde squeeze the maid's cheeks and ask if she wanted to test the limits of her patience. The butler asked the girl what was going on, and she replied that she was simply sharing her dinner with the maid. The heroine asked the man what would be left for the rest if she ate the loaf. The girl noticed that the maid and the other workers did not even want to pour hot water into her bath, which indicated their attitude towards her. The heroine assumed that there was either no food at all in the mansion, or that there was enough of it, but the servants deliberately did not want to serve her. The maids and butler bowed to the main character and said that she was right in her assumptions. The heroine was very upset by the consent of the maids and butler, as it meant that they were truly disobedient and did not want to follow her orders. At this point, the man quickly replied that he had meant something completely different and admitted that the heroine was right in that the estate really did not have enough resources. The man asked the maid to bring him the ledger, and she quickly complied with his request. Holding the ledger in her hands, the girl wondered why she had been given it. Determined to find out the truth, she began leafing through the ledger with a bored expression on her face, and at that moment she saw that all the accounts were negative. The girl could not believe that such a noble man as the Count had debts on all counts. April looked at the butler hopefully, thinking that this was some kind of joke, but he disappointed her. The man showed the girl the total amount of her debts, which significantly exceeded the income of the entire estate. The blonde smiled with a hint of self-destruction, as she had not expected to hear such news at all. The main character was surprised to realize that even in her second life, she still had debts. Hours passed like this, but the main character could not close her eyes and continued to stare at the ceiling. The events of the previous evening had taken a heavy toll on her, which did not contribute to her good mood. She, who was experiencing difficulties, hoped that at least in this life she would experience luxury. But instead of starting a new life and adapting to this world, she found herself in debt again. She cursed her sham marriage again and realized that she had to get a divorce immediately. In her fit of anger, she didn't notice how the headmaid had been silently watching her the whole time. The headmaid called out to her and apologized for introducing herself only now. The heroine showed no interest in the woman's name and instead asked what happened to her breakfast. The woman named Nora looked away, and the heroine realized that they were not going to feed her. The heroine, realizing that she would have to starve because of her debts, fell into despondency again. Although the heroine admitted that she had not expected such a turn of events, she resigned herself to her fate and asked to bring her yesterday's bread. At this moment, the head butler approached the girl and apologized for interfering. The head butler said that now was not the time for breakfast because the main character had a guest. The blonde was unpleasantly surprised when she learned that a guest had arrived early in the morning. Finally, the blonde reached the front door and saw the young man who had disturbed her. It turned out to be the same boy she accidentally met on the first day of her rebirth into April. Unaware of the blonde's thoughts, the young man smiled broadly and wished her good morning. The girl herself had no idea who he was, and the butler decided to correct the situation. The butler introduced the main character to Duke Fitzgerald from the founding line of the Biscayan Empire. The young man was also known for being the Lord of the Sorcerer's Tower. Having learned of his high status, the main character politely asked what they owed such an honor to. The girl mentally hoped that he had not come to repay the debt. While the heroine was deep in thought, the man took her hand and lightly touched her knuckles with his lips. The Duke did not let go of the heroine's hand, and continuing to smile, looked straight into her eyes. The man's smile was so bright and genuine that the heroine was momentarily speechless. Since the heroine did not respond to his smile, the young man decided to call out to the girl. The main character thought about the strange glow emanating from the young man. Meanwhile, the Duke decided to explain that he had come to pay his respects and offer his condolences to the widow. The girl thought the man was up to something when he said he wanted to congratulate his late friend on his wedding. The main character invited the man to sit down and talk to find out his true intentions. As far as the girl remembered, the late Farkon would now be 44 years old. The heroine did not understand why Fitzer was talking about friendship because there was a huge age difference between them. April couldn't understand why the young man lied to her so brazenly. She asked him directly if he was too young to be friends with her husband. The Duke replied that in the Biscayan Empire, the difference in status was more important than the difference in age. The girl thought it was a joke because she couldn't believe that a Duke with his high status could be friends with an adult man. The blonde asked the Duke how long he had decided to visit them, and he replied that he would like to stay for 3 days if she allowed it. When the girl heard that the man also needed to pick up his things, she turned to the butler. The girl tried to get confirmation from the butler, but as expected, he had no idea what was going on. The heroine suggested that if Gordon didn't know about this, then perhaps the Lord had bought something from the Count, but decided to keep it a secret. April, not knowing what exactly the Lord wanted to take, decided to simply show him the door. When the girl said that, unfortunately, she could not show hospitality, the young man looked at her in surprise. The blonde explained that she would be happy to accept him, but at the moment she had no food at all. Since she could not receive him because of her situation, she asked him to come later. The Duke knew that this was the Earl's estate, and April could not refuse him merely on the grounds of poverty. The main character foresaw such a reaction because she herself was the same. The heroine called Gordon to her and showed the Duke the ledger in which their debts were recorded. While the man was studying the documents, the girl apologized again for not being able to receive him properly. The white-haired man was at a loss and did not know what to do, because he needed to find one thing at all costs. The blonde, taking the man's silence as a sign of consent, asked Gordon to escort the Duke outside. At this point, the Duke intervened and said that if she allowed him to stay, he would bear the cost of food. The blonde realized that this was a matter of survival, so she immediately changed her mind about driving the Duke away. The main character was ready to give a room to anyone who promised to take care of the food. April thought that since the mansion was luxurious, it was only natural that one had to pay to stay there. The young man did not understand the main character's motives and was stunned by how quickly she agreed to his terms. He remembered again the feeling he had experienced when he kissed the heroine's hand and realized that this was exactly what he had expected. Meanwhile, Gordon stated that it would be a little difficult to receive the Duke as a guest. Gordon did not recommend accepting the Duke because it could have a bad effect on the main character's reputation. The blonde replied that if there is nothing to eat at home, you need to thank someone for the offer of help and accept it. She added that the man would also receive provisions from the Duke, so he should not worry. When the blonde said that they would now have a livelihood and food, the man understood why she agreed so quickly. Food was vital for her people, and the Duke had a lot of money so he could afford to share it with her. Just when the girl decided that it would not be difficult for the Duke to fulfill her request, a maid called out to her. The maid told April and Gordon that the Duke had already prepared everything and asked to call the main character. It had been less than 10 minutes since the Duke had been escorted to his chambers, so the maid's statement was shocking. When April found herself in front of the dining room, she still doubted that the Duke had completed the task in such a short time. April was a little worried and tried to find a logical explanation for what was happening. The blonde knew that Fitzer was a high-ranking nobleman and assumed that he might have invited a cook. Finally making up her mind, April walked into the dining room and saw the smiling Duke. The man was calm, unlike the heroine, who, seeing that there was nothing on the table, thought that she had been deceived. Trying not to show her irritation, April demanded to know what was going on. The man was in no hurry to answer, and first invited April to sit at the table. He smiled brightly, but the main character did not fall for it, and suspected that he was trying to hush up the matter using his beauty. Her anger at the Duke was so obvious that he flinched, not understanding the reason for her bad mood. At this point, the blonde got tired of waiting and reminded the man that he still had not fulfilled his promise and had not provided her with food. Hearing the blonde's words, the young man froze as he realized why she behaved this way. The girl was preparing for a conflict, but suddenly looked at the Duke in bewilderment, and all because the young man unexpectedly did not get angry but laughed at the situation. The blonde stared at him, not understanding what he found funny in her words. Having laughed his fill, the young man asked for forgiveness and explained that he simply found the girl's expression very funny. The young man said that the girl was wrong since he had not forgotten his promise and was ready to fulfill it. Duke Fitzer snapped his fingers and a magic circle appeared above his head. The main character had never seen a manifestation of magic before and was amazed. The girl didn't expect food to appear on the table while she turned away for just a second. While the girl was looking at what was happening in amazement, the Duke smiled and watched her reaction. He saw the delight on the girl's face and understood that his plan was working. When the heroine asked the Duke how he managed to create such exquisite food, he replied that it was not difficult for magicians to create luxury literally out of thin air. The Duke noted that he did not expect to see such a reaction from the girl, as if she had encountered magic for the first time in her life. To the girl's embarrassment, he stated that the childish delight in her eyes was very touching. Realizing that she had nothing to say in response, since this was truly the first time she had seen magic, she changed the subject and suggested that they begin eating. The food was created using magic, so the girl couldn't even imagine what it would taste like. After trying the dish, the main character was shocked to learn that the taste of the artificial food was amazing. The Duke was pleased to see that she appreciated his efforts and said that if she had any wishes, she could tell him about them at once. Since the heroine was the mistress of the house, she decided to feed her subordinates and asked the man to take the food to the room where her servants were. When the heroine voiced her request, the man fell silent for a moment, and the girl decided to call out to him. Having finally come to his senses, the young man explained to the surprised girl that he had already set the table with food. The man claimed to have cast a spell, but the girl thought he was lying. At this time, in the hall, the servants were running around and rejoicing at the fact that food appeared on their tables. With his abilities, the Duke was able to watch them and regretted that the blonde could not see how her servants ate. At that moment, the young man remembered about coffee and decided to offer it to the blonde. The girl remembered her recent desire and asked the man to make her iced coffee. April had high hopes that the man could make iced coffee, and his lordship did not disappoint. The man said that her request was not difficult to fulfill and ran his hand over his coffee cup. When the girl tried the coffee, she was pleasantly surprised by its refreshing taste. The main character was very impressed and thought that the Duke should become a barista. The girl thought that if the man were not a duke, she would hire him to work as her personal food vending machine. At that moment, the main character remembered that her dreams were unattainable because she didn't have any money anyway. While the main character was deep in thought, there was a knock and the dining room door opened slightly. It turned out that the main character was being looked for by her chief butler named Gordon. The man, whose mouth was covered in crumbs, reported that they had had a big problem. The shocked blonde asked what happened, and the man awkwardly cleared his throat. The butler told her about the unexpected visit of an important guest. It turned out that the one who came to the girl was the great countess, the mother of the late count. The main character was shocked when she learned about her mother-in-law's visit. The blonde couldn't understand why her mother-in-law had suddenly dropped in, since she hadn't even been present at their wedding. The main character realized that she had no choice but to greet her mother-in-law. The heroine stood up from her seat and informed the Duke that she needed to leave. After she made sure that the man would go up to his room and rest after eating, she headed out. April didn't know why her mother-in-law had come, but she wasn't going to let her boss her around. The heroine decided to find out more about this woman and asked the butler what he could tell about the great countess. The man said that the countess was a fashionista, even more so than young ladies, because she grew up in a wealthy family. The girl complained that the man was beating around the bush and could not admit that the countess was simply drawn to luxury. The man confirmed this and added that most of the blonde's debts were to the great countess. This statement made the main character shudder, because she did not expect it at all. She grimaced, realizing that new problems had fallen upon her. Now the girl realized that the woman had arrived so quickly to present her with a bill. The girl turned out to be right, because the first thing her mother-in-law told her was a demand to pay her debts. The woman handed her the bill and said that even though they were meeting for the first time, the girl should behave like a good bride and fulfill her obligations. When Gordon and April saw the amount, they were shocked because they did not expect such a large amount of debt. The blonde already had a lot of debts, and now an unknown woman had added her own to them. The blonde was not going to tolerate such treatment and said that she did not agree to pay for it. The main character asked her mother-in-law why she owed her something. The great countess was outraged and declared that the blonde had lost her mind since she did not obey her. To her surprise, the girl agreed and stated that she was indeed crazy, since she had married a dead man. The heroine asked the countess to leave if she finally understood what was going on. The great countess shuddered from the heroine's pressure and took a step back. Seeing that the great countess had shown weakness, the heroine straightened her hair with satisfaction. The heroine realized that she had made the right decision by pretending to be crazy. The blonde had long ago realized that if you showed that you were inadequate, people would be careful when dealing with you. In her past life, the heroine lived in Korea and was used to having a lot of holy fools around, so the woman was far from her level. At this point, the countess declared that her daughter-in-law had been too cruel to the one who had taken care of her and brought her 5 men. After her words, the blonde looked at her in bewilderment, not understanding what she was even talking about. As if on cue, men began to emerge from the carriage, and the countess announced that April could choose anyone. She added that it didn't matter to her which one April chose, and that now she wouldn't have any problems in the future. At first, April thought that the Countess had brought her servants, but the following words dispelled all her conjectures. In the novel, the late Count Kern Farkin was described as a dark-haired, brown-eyed man, so it was not difficult to guess why all the candidates had dark hair and brown eyes. Now April realized that the Countess had used her to give birth to a child who would receive the Count's entire inheritance and his debts. Using April as a puppet, the woman had no qualms about turning her into a harlot. The main character realized that April from the novel was arrogant and dissolute because she was used and manipulated. When the girl realized who was behind all this, she laughed, feeling angry and hurt. The Countess asked the main character what she found funny about it, to which she replied that the situation seemed so absurd that it made her laugh. The main character believed that her mother-in-law brought too many boys for such a delicate problem. The girl suggested that the woman decided to kill the other 4 boys after she made her choice. When the young men heard the words of the main character, they shuddered and turned to the Countess, demanding to know the truth. The young people wanted to discuss the situation, but the girl asked them not to move so she could get a better look at them. While the men looked at the girl in horror, she glanced at them, choosing a suitable match for herself. Her statement and behavior further fueled panic among the men, and one of them shouted that he did not want to die. When the man voiced his fears, the others agreed with him and they all ran outside. The great Countess could only watch as her plan crumbled before her eyes. The main character looked down on the woman because she had won again. With a defiant expression on her face, she asked if the woman wanted to continue. The main character expected that the woman would not interfere anymore, and her guess turned out to be correct. The Countess said in a hurry that they would talk later and left. The main character was worried because she didn't want her mother-in-law to stay with her. The great Countess did not even suspect that the butler decided to help his mistress with this problem. The Countess, heading towards April, was confident that she could easily control the poor commoner. Everything turned out to be much more complicated, but the woman did not give up and decided to stay for a while. While the woman was considering her next steps, she noticed several men carrying her to the luggage room. After some time, the main character recalled with a smile how the Countess demanded that her things be returned to her. The blonde planned not only to drive away the woman who wanted to stay for free, but also to profit from it. She eventually sold everything and, thanks to the proceeds from the sale of the Grand Countess's luxury items, was able to pay the servants' wages. She began to have hope that one day she would be able to pay off her bills through perseverance and hard work. She smiled sincerely and said that she believed in her abilities. Having said this loudly, she suddenly began to tremble, after which she threw her hair back. She had no idea that the main character was watching her awkward movements. The young man in the next room, trying to remain unnoticed, glanced at the girl. The young man smiled as he was finally convinced that the main character was an amazing woman. The next morning, the main character could be seen near the gates of the mansion. The main character saw servants who praised her and said that she was wonderful because she paid all the delayed wages. They had never been paid their full wages before, even when Lord Farkin was alive, and they didn't know how they would be able to go home with such a large sum. The blonde was glad to see that her servants were in a good mood, and she realized that she was the reason for this. When they noticed her, the girl greeted them and said that she wanted to ask them for something. The girl did not expect that the young people would respond with such enthusiasm. After recovering from the shock, the girl said that she would like them to find the seal of House Farkin for her. Although the girl managed to cope with her mother-in-law, this could not last long. It was just luck, and if the Countess decided to hire thieves to steal the family seal, the blonde would not be able to handle them. The girl was sure that the Countess would forge more documents and drown her estate in debt. The blonde needed a seal to hide it securely where no one could find it. If they had put the seal in a safe or buried it somewhere, the Countess would never have known where to look. Gordon thought her plan was great, but he knew there was one big problem. When the heroine noticed that Gordon was hiding his eyes, she asked what happened. Gordon was forced to admit that no one knew where the seal was. Count Farkin never revealed the location of the seal to anyone until his death, and to find the seal, it was necessary to turn everything upside down. The heroine gathered all her servants, although she understood that they were now on a legal break. The heroes faced a serious task that they could only cope with together. Everyone understood the urgency of the matter, and the girl showed a drawing of the family seal, which Gordon kindly provided. The man tried his best, but the servant still could not make out what was depicted in the drawing. One of the maids asked with a naive look why they were being shown this drawing. The blonde looked at her with bewilderment and said that the drawing was needed in order to find the seal. The main character added that she gives them 3 hours to find the family seal. As a result, the servants began to carefully examine every corner of the estate. Despite careful inspection, the seal was never found. One of the maids suggested that the seal might have been stolen. It seemed to her that this was the whole reason for the constantly increasing debts. The blonde would have liked to continue searching, but it was too late, and exploiting the staff was considered a violation of work ethics. She decided to end the search and said that they could stop there. Today, the blonde was very tired from the endless running, and her legs were like cotton wool. At that moment, the blonde felt a sudden deterioration in her condition. The blonde understood that she needed to get to her bedroom in time, but she no longer had the strength. The girl lost consciousness, but before her body touched the ground, the Duke managed to catch it. The young man carefully lowered the girl to the floor and asked if everything was okay with the Countess. The protagonist did not receive an answer from the girl, so he decided that she had lost consciousness. Seeing her exhausted face, the young man felt sincerely sorry for the girl. Realizing that he couldn't leave her alone, the young man picked up the blonde in his arms. Having carried her into the bedroom, the young man carefully covered the girl with a blanket so that she would not catch a cold. Observing her condition, Fitzer assumed that the girl had a high temperature. Due to the high temperature, the girl's face began to turn red, and cold sweat appeared on her forehead. Keeping a straight face, the protagonist snapped his fingers. To ease her condition, the main character put a compress on the girl's forehead. To the young man's surprise, after the compress touched the girl's forehead, she began to shiver from the cold. Since the girl was unconscious, she could not influence her facial expression in any way. Seeing the different expressions on the girl's face, the young man could hardly contain his laughter. Realizing that he had done everything possible, the young man leaned over to get a better look at the girl. The man was once again convinced that the main character was an amazing woman. When he looked at her, the smile never left his face, although he hadn't smiled like that for a long time. Besides, all this time he felt only dirt from the touch of other people. For some reason, with the main character, everything was different, and he did not experience any negative reactions. Unconsciously, his hand reached out to the main character, but he came to his senses in time. Quickly turning away to avoid temptation, the young man headed for the exit. Pulling his hood over his head, he reminded himself that he shouldn't feel any unnecessary emotions. He reminded himself that he shouldn't let anyone into his heart anyway. At the moment when the young man went out through the window, one of the maids entered the main character's room. The maid looked at the open window and wondered why it was open. After that, she turned her gaze to the heroine, and finally noticed that she was feeling bad. The maid ran up to the main character and began to beg her to wake up. She decided to call a doctor to help her cope with the illness and bring down the high fever. April seemed to hear the maid's thoughts and forced herself to open her eyes. Watching as her sudden awakening startled Nora, April asked the head maid who had brought her here. When the maid replied that she did not know who had brought April to her chambers, the blonde immediately guessed who her benefactor was. The girl stared at the hot water bottle the Duke had prepared for her with a questioning expression on her face. Although her assumption could be true, the girl immediately dismissed such thoughts. It made no sense to her that a man like the Duke would do something like that for someone he had just met. Although she made a sound argument, the girl still suspected that the one who helped her might have been the Duke. After a few hours of rest, the main character felt better. The next morning, she woke up full of strength and energy, which the head maid immediately noticed. But the maid still had doubts and had already begun to think about calling a doctor to make sure that her mistress was all right. The main character assured the maid that everything was fine and explained that the slight fatigue was caused by a recent illness. When the matter was settled, the main character asked the woman why she had brought 2 more maids with her. The head maid explained that due to her busy schedule, she could not always be with the main character, so she decided to hire a temporary servant. She added that if someone was always there, she wouldn't have to worry about situations like yesterday. The main character eventually decided that this was a good idea and chose the first maid. Nora, who did not expect the girl to choose another maid without hesitation, began to be indignant. When Jaira asked the reason, the blonde admitted that the maid was a little silly. In the end, Jair had no choice but to get down on his knees and beg the blonde. The brunette again reminded the main character that she had been by her side since she first entered the mansion. The maid's hopes that she would become a chambermaid angered the blonde because she had only been in the mansion for a couple of days. It was unthinkable to her that someone who had served her only once would start playing on her pity. At this point, the head maid intervened and said that the blonde did not have to make a decision right now. The head maid suggested that it would be good for the heroine to give them a chance to compete. The maid suggested giving them an order and, based on the results, choosing the one whose work she liked best. The heroine liked the idea, so she asked the girls to help her choose a dress for today. After some time, a satisfied Jaira opened the door to the main character's chambers again and announced that she had found the perfect dress for her. The blonde was surprised how the rather slow girl was able to complete her work so quickly. The main character decided to check the dress first and called the maid to her. The moment the maid showed her the black dress, all the blonde's hopes collapsed. The girl, who everyone considered a klutz, declared that this dress was perfect for the heroine, who was in mourning. The head maid felt that the atmosphere around the main character was tense. She had served the Count's family for a long time and, being a perceptive woman, she immediately realized that something was wrong with the blonde. The maid turned out to be right in her conclusions, as the blonde eventually couldn't take it anymore. The girl believed that Jaira decided to remind her of the fact that she married a man she had never seen. The head maid stopped the girl who wanted to teach a lesson to the other party who had gone too far in their jokes. As soon as Jaira ran out of the room, the main character came to her senses a little and began to catch her breath. While the main character was complaining about the maid who did not show her due respect, another girl entered the room. Another maid brought the main character a truly expensive dress made of expensive material and elegant style. The blonde remembered very well that there were no such expensive toilets in the wardrobe, so she could not understand how the maid got it for her. The blonde asked the girl about this, and she said that yesterday she had stolen a dress from the luggage of the great countess. Having approved of the maid's actions, the blonde said that she now entrusted her life to her care. Introducing herself as Joanna, she told the heroine that she would help her get ready, since she would soon be leaving. Mentally praising herself for choosing the right maid, the blonde asked to tell her to bring the carriage. The blonde was extremely pleased with her new dress, as it literally radiated luxury. It was the most beautiful dress she had ever worn, so she was no longer embarrassed to go out in public wearing it. When the main character was leaving the room, someone she knew called out to her. It was Duke Fitzgerald, who happened to be passing her room and saw her leaving. The young man wanted to ask if she was leaving, but he froze mid-sentence. The main character looked questioningly at the young man, waiting for the continuation of his question. It was no use denying that she had inhabited a very attractive body, of which she was very proud. To change the subject, the main character asked the young man what he was doing in the hallway. The young man replied that he was looking for her to have lunch together, prepared by him like yesterday. The blonde was glad to hear these words, but she had to go to the lawyer so she could not eat with the young man. While the girl was talking about her plans for the day, she didn't notice that the man's face darkened for a moment when he mentioned the lawyer. The man quickly corrected his expression and said that in that case he would cast a freshness spell on the food. Finally, the man told the girl that she could go about her business in peace. The maids who watched their interaction could not help but notice how harmoniously they looked together. The girls began to suspect that their mistress might decide to marry again. After some time, the main character could be seen in the office of the Farcon County lawyer. When the girl told him about her problem, he said that it couldn't be fixed. The girl was outraged, as she had become the victim of a marriage scam, and everyone knew about the death of Count Farcon. It was known to all that Count Farcon did not want to marry before the appointed day, but his relatives filed an application for registration of the marriage, and after his death entered into a marriage without his consent. The man understood that this marriage was strange, but reminded the heroine that there were no grounds for its dissolution, since all legal requirements had been met. The enraged protagonist also learned that Count Farcon still has not received a death certificate, so formally he is still alive and has legal standing. The main character already suspected this, but was still unhappy to learn that she would not be able to get a divorce. In a moment of despair, the main character heard the man say that divorce was only possible if there were good reasons. The main character immediately demanded to know what the reasons for divorce should be. As an example, the man said that a woman may have the right to divorce in the event of serious bodily harm caused by her husband or his relatives. The main character couldn't believe that the only way to get a divorce was to wait until Deborah beat her half to death. When the girl left the building, she was still thinking about the barbaric laws that existed in the empire. On her way here, she hoped that a divorce would help her get rid of her debts, but a visit to a lawyer brought no results. As a result, the debt remained hanging on her, which greatly upset the main character. The maid noticed her mistress's bad mood and tried to console her, saying that the laws could change. To distract the girl, the maid suggested going shopping since they were already there. However, her attempt failed, because the blonde became even more angry when she remembered that they could not afford to go shopping without money. The maid realized that her attempt had failed and decided to leave for a while so as not to irritate her mistress even more. The main character remained standing in place while the brunette went to look after the carriage. At that moment, a man of unpleasant appearance called out to the blonde. He asked why her lovely face was so tense. The man continued to try to please the main character, but she remained adamant. Then he took a rose out of his secret pocket and handed it to her with an offer to get to know each other better. But the main character refused the man's offer to meet over a cup of tea. Then the man asked again if she really didn't want to have a cup of tea with him, comparing himself to a bun. The blonde began to lose patience because the man did not accept her refusal and behaved too intrusively. The man decided that the girl was simply very modest and was refusing him only out of embarrassment. The main character, masterfully hiding her contempt, asked the man about his family. The man proudly told the girl that he was the nephew of the Marquis of Gout. The girl concluded that the man did not have a high position since he was not a marquis. With a smile, the girl told the young man that one day she would send a letter to the Marquis of Gout. The man still didn't understand what she was talking about, and then the girl explained that she would tell his uncle about how he continued to force himself on the lady, who had already made it clear on several occasions that she did not want to communicate with him. She admitted that she was curious how the Marquis would react to such poor upbringing of his nephew. After her words, the man got angry and said that the only good thing about her was her appearance. The man's words did not hurt April at all, and she asked if it was only her face that attracted him to her. April theatrically declared that she was born beautiful, and people judged her only by her appearance. When they started talking about appearance, the girl decided to evaluate the man's appearance. A wicked smile appeared on the girl's face, and she said that the man had the attractiveness of a dried squid. When the girl saw the other side clenching his fists, she realized that the man was going to hit her. This was in favor of the main character, because if he beats her, she will squeeze him to the last penny. So when the man called her a scoundrel and swung his left hand, the girl was in anticipation. The girl mentally prepared herself for the blow, after which she would immediately pretend that she felt ill. But to the surprise of the main character, her plan was thwarted by the intervention of another person. Duke Fearson turned out to be the man who stopped the man who was about to hit the main character. The Duke stated that the main character is very vigilant because a man who raises his hand to a woman does not deserve to be in her company. The man accosting the girl also recognized the Duke, but by that time it was too late. The man said he would have to ask the Marquis of Goat why his nephew had grown up so ill-mannered. After injuring the man's arm, he said that if he had not intervened, the woman would have been in as much pain as he was now. The Marquis's nephew became frightened and fell to his knees, asking for forgiveness. The Duke did not believe in the sincerity of the apology because the man was apologizing to him and not to the victim. The Marquis's nephew, fearing that he would be hurt again, asked Milady's forgiveness and said that he regretted his rudeness to her. The girl saw no point in apologizing if the young man did not feel remorse for his actions. Therefore, the girl, without thinking twice, declared that she did not accept his apology. She added that although the man was not just rude to her, she did not want anything more from him. April asked the Duke to let the man go, and the young man happily submitted to her will. As soon as his hands were free, the man, again asking for forgiveness, quickly ran away from the scene. The young people looked after him and then continued talking. Although the girl did not expect this, she was glad for his help and thanked the Duke for his assistance. The only thing she was interested in was how he got here, so she asked him about it. The young man said that he came to the barracks on business, and on the way back he noticed the main character in trouble. The main character assumed that a murder had occurred, but the young man assured her that nothing terrible had happened. This world turned out to be not as cruel as she thought, but the main character was still nervous. The main character suggested to the young man to go together, because Joanna was supposed to arrive soon with a carriage. A few hours later, the main character looked at herself in the mirror after she was ready for bed. The blonde thought that with such a beautiful appearance, she would surely encounter similar situations again. The high society became aware of the Count's death, so they perceived the main character as easy prey. The girl realized that she looked young and naive, so she wanted to have protection so that no one could get close to her. At that moment, she realized that the right person was already next to her. The main character remembered Duke Fearson, who was not only a very talented magician, but also brilliantly handsome. While the main character was thinking about how to attract the Duke's attention, several more hours passed. At night, dressed in a light dress, the girl went out to breathe fresh air and look at the stars. While looking out at the night view from her balcony, she noticed a light-colored head that seemed familiar to her. It was Duke Fearson, who looked as if he was secretly searching for something. The girl decided to share her plan with the Duke right now and hurried out into the street. Putting on her sandals, the girl walked quickly out into the street and soon found herself behind the Duke. Up close, the girl noticed that the young man was doing something strange. Whispering a spell, the young man created a magic circle on his palm. After the young man cast the spell, glitter fell from the sky, attracting the girl's attention. The girl was genuinely amazed and compared this unusual phenomenon to a beautiful dream. The blonde didn't notice that she had started speaking out loud, and the man flinched when he heard her voice. He quickly turned around and called out to the main character in a trembling voice. The man's actions caught the girl by surprise, and she laughed quietly. The girl found his behavior suspicious, but she still said that thanks to him she enjoyed the beautiful view. The man asked the girl with a smile why she was not sleeping at such a late hour. The main character did not lose her composure and said that she would also like to ask him this question. April realized the man was looking for something, but she couldn't understand why he couldn't do it in daylight. The main character decided to take advantage of the moment and offer the man a deal. She said she understood his desire to take a walk in the cool of the night because she herself could not sleep. The main character was not surprised that he did not admit his true motives. He seemed to want to change the subject and said that it was dangerous for my lady to go out into the yard at night. Taking the initiative, the young man asked to do him the honor of allowing her to leave. When the girl agreed, they began a leisurely walk. At this moment, the girl began to put her plan into action. The girl noticed that, despite their short acquaintance, his lordship had already provided her with significant assistance. April expressed her gratitude and admitted that she had one more request for the young man. Sticking to the original plan, the main character admitted that she needed a fictitious lover. The man was surprised that she used the word beloved, although fictitious sounded even worse. The young man, finally showing emotion and embarrassed, asked what the girl meant by a fictitious lover. The girl explained that she needed a man who would create the appearance of a relationship with her in public. After the girl's statement, the young man looked away and thought for a moment. It made no sense for him to create the appearance of a relationship because many men would dream of courting the heroine. And although others would indeed arrange duels for her favor, it was the Duke who was important to the girl, who would be different from the rest. She explained that the reason for her desires was simple. She just wanted to feel protected. If she had a lover, no one would dare to harass her like that shorty did today. She also shared with the young man that she was already tired of men. The main character no longer wanted to open her heart. Well, she couldn't stay alone either, because then the men wouldn't give her a break and would pursue her. When the girl remarked on her beauty, the young man was struck by her arrogance. While the young man remained silent, the girl began to feel embarrassed, assuming that he still did not understand her hints. The girl assumed that he didn't understand her jokes, since he remained silent. The main character was a little disappointed, although she expected such a reaction. Duke Fitzgerald was handsome, talented, and of noble birth. He could live without looking back at the opinions of others. It was comfortable and not scary to be around Duke Fitzgerald, but the offer to become her fictitious lover must have been humiliating for the man. The main character decided to politely apologize and leave immediately. Before leaving, the main character asked the young man to forget about her proposal. The girl was thinking about what method she would have to use next, when suddenly the man grabbed her wrist. After asking her to stop, the young man said that she still had not heard his answer. Still holding her wrist, the young man explained that he was simply trying to collect his thoughts. Admitting that he did not expect her to run away, he said that he accepted her offer. Having heard the cherished words, the main character froze in shock. Although the main character was flattered, she still did not understand why he suddenly agreed to her proposal. The main character could not believe that the young man would seriously become her fictitious lover. Seeing that she was full of doubts, the young man asked her if she thought that he would not accept her proposal. The blonde looked away and admitted that she asked him because she had nothing to lose. The young man wondered why she was so unsure that he would agree. The girl then explained that it was an extremely humiliating proposal for such a high-ranking person as he. The main character decided to live her life in a certain way, but the man did not make the same decision. Therefore, it would be a great surprise for her if he agreed to her proposal. The main character thought that rumors would spread in high society that the Duke had gone mad. When the girl asked the young man his opinion, he was not surprised. He smiled brightly and admitted with a clear conscience that his reputation left much to be desired. The blonde couldn't believe that someone as perfect as the Duke could have a bad reputation. The young man explained that his position obliged him to attend many balls. Somehow, he seemed to everyone to be an extremely calm and very cold person. He never had a partner at balls because he always refused to dance with the ladies. Therefore, there were rumors in secular society that he was a eunuch. When he told her about this rumor, the girl stared at him blankly for a moment. The girl silently scanned the young man with her gaze from top to bottom, which made him cover himself in embarrassment. Noticing her intense gaze, the man covered his chest and declared that these were all false rumors. The main character didn't believe him, but she didn't want to embarrass him even more, so she agreed. Having come to his senses, the young man said that these rumors did not bother him, but the more they were talked about, the more people began to believe them. The only way to disprove the rumor was inconvenient and impractical. The main character admitted that this method was indeed impracticable. At this point, the Duke continued to say that he thought her offer would help him. After all, if everyone finds out that he has a lover, then the old rumors will disappear by themselves. The main character agreed with the Duke that it was better for people to think that he had a lover than to assume that he was a eunuch. When the main character, with an innocent expression on her face, called him eunuch, the man asked her not to say that word anymore. The main character asked the man if he was okay with the fact that he couldn't get married, and he replied that getting married wasn't in his plans anyway. This caused the girl to scan the young man again for dysfunction, which confused the man. To close this topic once and for all, the young man told the girl that he had suffered from haptophobia since early childhood. It was a rare and specific phobia, when a person is afraid and therefore avoids touching any people. Although the young man confessed his phobia to her, the girl still did not trust him because he touched her at their first meeting, and even kissed her hand. The man assured the main character that he was telling the truth and promised to always be honest with her from now on. He explained to the main character that he felt fear and anxiety when other people approached him. But when the man touched the main character, he did not feel fear or anxiety. The main character felt strange when she learned that he felt this way only with her. The young man, holding the girl's hands, admitted that he himself could not understand his feelings next to her. He was pleasantly surprised when he touched her and felt no fear, so her offer didn't seem like a bad idea to him. The blonde asked the young man if he would agree to become her fictitious lover because she would help him overcome his haptophobia. Coming closer, the man said that no other woman would want to marry him if she saw him in love with April. The blonde coldly noted that the rumors about him would soon stop, but the laws of the empire forbade women from remarrying, so someone might follow him. The man denied this statement and said that forbidden love is much more common than she thinks. He added that he could be so deeply in love with this woman that he would not pay attention to anyone around him. If another lady shows interest in him, he will ignore her because he considers the main character to be the most beautiful girl in the entire empire. His statement was very bold, so the man asked the girl to understand him correctly. The girl was not at all embarrassed and stated that she was not one of those who falls in love easily. Wrapping her arms around his neck, she added that falling in love with the Duke was not part of her plans. Bringing her face close to his, she asked if they had a common goal. The young man also gently embraced the main character and confirmed her words, saying that they had one goal. He agreed with her statement and assured the girl that he was not going to fall in love either. Stepping back from the young man, the girl suggested that he keep his feelings under control. The blonde continued to say that she did not expect him to accept her proposal and refuse the opportunity to marry. She asked if the senior dukes would object to this, but the man replied that the title of duke was passed down from generation to generation. The girl could not understand why he was so reluctant to get married, since even taking into account the phobia with his appearance, a marriage of convenience did not seem like something complicated. The man remained silent, and the girl decided that it was too personal and she had crossed the line. The girl asked him to forget her question because if it was personal, he didn't have to share it with her. To ease the tension, the girl said that a wedding is for those who have gone crazy. The girl managed to lift the young man's spirits, and she was glad that he felt better. When the girl was about to go to her room, the man asked her to address him not by his title from now on. Duke Furzin suggested that the heroine forget about formalities in public and in private. The blonde couldn't believe that she could actually act casually with him, because he was a very important person in the empire. She feared that rumors would spread that she was a villain and was treating the Duke rudely. In the end, she decided that then no one would underestimate her, and this would be good for her. The girl asked him to take care of her as a partner and allowed him to address her by name. When they sealed the agreement with a handshake, the girl decided to ask him about something. The young man smiled and said that now that they were partners, she could ask him anything. After a while, the young man's expression changed completely. Duke Furzin was embarrassed by the fact that the main character invited him into her room. The girl began to get irritated by his behavior because he had already asked for the 6th time whether he could definitely enter her room. She accused him of imagining things, and that's why he was embarrassed. The main character reminded the young man that she also has a sense of shame. The heroine said that she would not ask him to do anything difficult, but simply wanted to take a bath in a warm bath. The main character complained that she thought their deal would be useful, but so far she doesn't see much sense in it. The young man had no choice but to give in and prepare a bath for her. The girl invited him into her room and asked why he was so upset. The main character laughed because she didn't know that the Duke was so shy. The man said that it was usually not like this, but last time he didn't even have time to look around. As the man muttered the last words, the girl grabbed the vase. At first, the young man did not understand why the main character picked up a vase of flowers. Soon the girl picked up the vase and asked what last time he was talking about. The girl demanded an explanation when the young man made his way into her room. The young man quickly explained to the girl that he was there at the moment when she fainted and he had to carry her to the room. When the girl realized that the young man had no intention of doing anything bad or shameful, she immediately calmed down. The main character put the vase back in its place and told the young man that he should have told her right away that he had brought it into the room. The girl apologized for misunderstanding him, and the young man said that everything was fine. The young man smiled at the girl and said that he would fill the bath for her. As soon as the young man filled the bath with hot water, he bowed to the girl and left. Lying in the hot water, the girl thought that things weren't going so bad. The next day, the girl was informed that the remaining amount had to be repaid by a certain date. These words angered the main character because she was tired of people coming to her almost every day. The main character was irritated because the debt collectors had already personally come to her home and tried to collect the debt. The girl was able to sort out the employees' salaries, but the debt still weighed on her. April understood that despite the marriage, she would have to pay off the debts. She wanted to find some way to get some money and asked her headmaid about it. The headmaid brought the girl the accounting books so that she could check everything again. While looking through the books, the girl noticed the only source of income that was listed among their debts. The headmaid was also surprised to see the entry and decided to call the butler who was in charge of the books. When Gordon finally arrived, the girl noted that he looked very rumpled. He explained that he didn't want to disturb her, but the lady wanted to continue the conversation with her, and in an extremely persistent manner. The girl praised the butler for not letting the Countess into the house, and finally asked about what was bothering her. After seeing the recording the girl was talking about, the man explained that it was all the money sent by the imperial family. Count Farkin was possibly a descendant of the imperial family, and the girl suggested that he might have received some compensation to maintain his status. Howard dashed her hopes by saying that the former count was definitely not related to the imperial family, and frankly, he didn't even know what kind of money it was. The girl thought that if it was not a salary, then perhaps it was a funded pension that had been coming in for a long time and could be saved in the future. The man said he did not want to jump to conclusions, but considered it unlikely as he had tried to find out details, but they had not been contacted since the Count's death. Since the connection was broken and they could no longer find out anything in more detail, the blonde asked how things were going with the search for the family seal. The headmaid explained that they had searched every place in the Count's office and his chambers, but had not found the seal. After complaining that her husband had hidden such an important thing so well, the girl said that she would be leaving Joanna for a while. The main character decided to buy a new dress and went to the center. While walking nearby, the ladies noticed a carriage and recognized the coat of arms of the Fitzer family. But when the main character got out of the carriage, no one knew who she was and what her relationship was to the Duke. All eyes were on the girl, because although people did not recognize her, she possessed a charming beauty. The girl didn't care about other people's opinions, and she allowed everyone to spread rumors about her and Duke Fitzer. At that moment, a familiar voice called out to Countess Farkin, causing her to freeze in her place. The gray-haired man looked at the girl with disapproval and asked what she was doing in Duke Fitzgerald's carriage. The girl immediately remembered the gray-haired man, because it was he who had forced her to marry the dead man. The main character looked at the man with contempt and said that she was irritated by his shamelessness. Although the man did not have positive feelings for her, he expressed hope that Countess Farkin's life was going well. The blonde laughed haughtily and sarcastically stated that thanks to his care, her life was turning out unimaginably wonderful. The maid couldn't find a place for herself, watching their irritating smiles and bickering. The maid decided to help the heroine and noticed that the man, judging by his clothes, was most likely a temple minister. While the girl was worried that the man might cause a scandal, the blonde interrupted her and said that he was not just a minister, but an archbishop. The maid wanted to ask the heroine to choose her expressions, but she did not listen to her and declared that this was the same archbishop who, out of hatred for her, married her to a dead man. While the brunette was trying to pull her mistress away from the man, she managed to declare that the marriage was invalid. Unfortunately for them, the priest overheard their conversation and said that he would never forgive the main character for such rudeness. With an innocent expression on her face, the main character pretended not to understand what was being discussed. The main character called the maid to give her a handkerchief. Wiping away non-existent tears, she asked how, as an archbishop, he dared to accuse a married woman of lying. The people around decided that the archbishop was insulting the beautiful woman and began to condemn him. The girl's plan caused a sensation because the man became embarrassed and began to make excuses, saying that everything was not as they thought. The blonde turned to the maid and asked if she had spoken rudely to the archbishop. Joanna played along and said she didn't remember it because she was addressing her and the archbishop had simply misunderstood. The man again tried to remind them that they had said that he had married his mistress to a dead man out of hatred. The blonde agreed with the statement, but also pointed out that she was forced into the situation, so she has the right to apologize. When April began to cry again, people around her began to sympathize with her and condemn the archbishop for making the girl cry. The main character looked at the man and showed him that it was all a pretense when no one was looking. The man was shocked that a girl who was much younger than him was behaving so frivolously. When the archbishop passed out from the anger that was overwhelming him, the girl decided it was time for her to move on. At this moment, the main character's maid remembered something and asked the girl to wait. The girl headed back and, approaching the unconscious archbishop, stopped next to him. With a sublime smile on her face, she wished the priest a good journey to the next world. Seeing this, the main character was even more delighted with her maid, who had learned such jokes from her. Now that the issue with the bishop was resolved, they decided to go shopping. Entering the nearest store, they asked if they had any new dresses. The unexpected arrival of the girls caught the saleswomen by surprise. The girl noticed the awkward reaction of the sellers and realized that they saw her through the window. She knew she had caused a stir with her quarrel with the archbishop, so she could not blame them. One of the girls greeted the main character and introduced herself as Saya Conches, the owner of the store. The blonde also introduced herself, and Saya thanked her for visiting the salon. The brunette said that she would be glad if such a beautiful girl like her wore her dresses. While the woman went to get a catalog of dresses that would probably suit the heroine, the girl began to look around the store. The maid wanted to help her mistress choose a suitable dress, and she did it beautifully. The eyes were dazzled by the beauty of the dresses, and the blue one stood out among them, perfectly matching the lady's hair, the color of fresh honey. The style and length of the dress were perfect, so when the girl tried it on, it fit her perfectly. The main character asked her maid's opinion, and she said that the dress suited her very well. When the main character asked the maid to pick out another dress that would suit her, she heard someone's voice. In the next room, two ladies were discussing where they should stay now. The main character became curious and decided to look into the next room to see what was going on there. Coming closer, the main character overheard a conversation between two women and learned that one of them had been kicked out of her uncle's house. The unknown woman even told her friends about her upcoming debut in the capital, but now she had to abandon this idea. Noble ladies from the provinces prefer to make their debut in the capital rather than in their own estate. And if a girl is kicked out of the house where she grew up her whole life, her life can really collapse in a matter of seconds. The blonde couldn't understand why she couldn't stay at a hotel, since she had money. The maid explained to her mistress that she was the only one willing to endure hardships, but an ordinary aristocrat could not afford it. Besides, if someone dares to propose to a lady in such a hotel, it will be the worst thing that can happen. Meanwhile, the stranger continued to complain that she would miss an important event that happens once in a lifetime. She was supposed to attend the celebration at the invitation of the Marquis and get into the imperial palace. Her companion also regretted that they would not be able to rent a house in the capital since there were no hotels there, only for aristocrats. When the main character heard their conversation, she understood how to make money. The main character knocked and apologized for interfering in their conversation. The heroine made a graceful curtsy and said that she had accidentally heard about their problem. Smiling, the main character said that she could help them with their problem. When an unfamiliar girl intervened in their conversation, the ladies tensed up. The blonde apologized again for her tactlessness and added that after hearing their story, she wanted to help. When the girls saw the sincere expression on the main character's face, they thought she was an angel. The girl's mother was still wary, but her daughter tried to explain to her that this kind woman was offering help and they should listen to her. Although her daughter's words were logical, the mother was still wary, as she could not believe in the man she was seeing for the first time. But the main character was adamant and kept a polite smile on her face. In the end, even the woman gave in and decided to listen to the blonde for once. Having received their approval, the main character began to talk about how she had recently opened a new business. It was a hotel reserved exclusively for aristocrats and was guarded very carefully. The main character also mentioned that you can find a good match in this hotel. The girl the main character had just met was delighted to hear her words. The brunette immediately imagined how she would find her true love in this hotel. The blonde looked at her in surprise, as she was sure that she had not promised anything like that. The girl could no longer stop and asked her mother to stay at the Farkhan's estate. She told her mother that the place looked nice, and she would like it too. The woman still doubted, but the main character mentally urged them on, already feeling the jingle of coins in her wallet. She said that if they were the first guests, she would give them a 50% discount. These words finally convinced the woman, who was planning to come the following week. As soon as they left, the maid began to praise her mistress, saying that she had amazing skills. The maid was interested in how she managed to persuade the stranger, and the blonde explained that people start to go crazy when they hear the words, especially for you or exclusive. After figuring this out, the maid was still worried because she didn't know if they would be able to cope and run the business. This can be quite difficult for them as they have few workers on the estate and will not be able to provide the best service. Those who lived in the estate were not professionals in their field, so Joanna even thought that the heroine would want to hire new people. To her surprise, the main character stated that there was no point in this, and they would use the rotation method. Their hotel's food will be prepared by top chef Lake, and guests will be so mesmerized by the couple's activities that they won't notice the hotel's shortcomings. The girl wanted to provide guests with the best service and include massage, yoga, and other classes that her staff would conduct in the daily program. If the girl pays attention to the workers and includes them in the daily program, they will not need extra labor. The maid agreed that the plan sounded good, but still doubted whether the workers would be able to master yoga, massage, and pottery in 1 week. The main character also had doubts, but hoped that Gordon would offer a solution. Gordon, as if he sensed that they were talking about him, began to sneeze violently while in the mansion. The younger maid assumed that the butler had caught a cold. The younger maid thought that while the mistress was away, the master butler could rest a little with the other workers. While in the city, the main character felt as if something was pushing her to think that Gordon was now very angry. Joanna assured the main character that Gordon and Nora had a lot of experience and would do an excellent job of training the rest of the servants. The girl was right, because Gordon was right now preparing to scold the maid who wanted to idle away her time. Meanwhile, the store employee finally finished her business and approached the blonde again. When the store worker saw the main character, her eyes widened in admiration of her beauty. The store employee, realizing that with such an appearance any dress would fit, suggested that the blonde try on a few more dresses that had just been brought in. The next outfit also had blue tones to highlight the main character's eyes. The maid highly praised the main character's new outfit, and the store owner even burst into tears of admiration. Shedding tears, she approached the main character and said that she was now her muse. With deft movements, she took out several dresses and asked the girl to try them on as quickly as possible. Since there were too many of them, the main character asked to send her 10 dresses to the estate that would fit in length and style. The woman was genuinely upset by the fact that the main character would not even try on the dresses before buying them. Meanwhile, the maid approached the main character and asked if she wanted to return to the estate. But the main character was not yet going home because she wanted to be shown the evening dresses for her maid. The brunette wore such nice clothes for the first time, and the blonde said that they could buy her a few more of those dresses. In the end, the girl decided to buy 10 dresses for herself and 5 dresses for Joanna. To pay for the purchase, the main character handed the shop owner the coat of arms of the Fitzer family. As they left the store, the woman who was seeing the main character off wondered about the connection between the blonde and Duke Fitzgerald. When they were alone, the maid was finally able to thank her mistress for the clothes. The main character replied that it was not difficult for her to buy clothes for the maid, because the money would not have been spent on anything else anyway. At that moment, the main character heard a noise and turned to its source. It turned out that the main character was also passing by and noticed her presence. Meanwhile, the owner of the studio where the main character was still thinking that all this was a little strange. Her assistant asked what exactly seemed strange to the girl. She explained that Countess Farkhan had shown the coat of arms belonging to the Fitzer family when she paid for her purchases at the store. Countess Farkhan introduced herself as the wife of Count Farkhan, which meant that she was married, but by showing the coat of arms of another family, she caused surprise. The girl wanted to ask the main character about her relationship with another man because she had doubts and she wanted to know the truth. The blonde noticed that the girl hesitated and could not formulate her thoughts, so she decided to ask if she had any problems. A little embarrassed, the brunette admitted that she was bothered by the fact that this coat of arms was different from the coat of arms of County Farcon. The main character understood what the brunette meant and explained that the coat of arms was different because it belonged to a different family. Seeing that the woman was well-versed in heraldry, the blonde asked if that meant she might think that April had stolen the coat of arms. The store owner once again asked whether it was possible to demand payment of the bill from the owner of the coat of arms. The main character nodded and said that Duke Fitzer would pay all expenses. The woman also added that the main character called the Duke by name, and this meant that there was a special relationship between them. It was not worth jumping to conclusions, but the thought still occurred to them that the heroine had managed to become the lover of that very unapproachable Duke. This inspired the store owner greatly, as she immediately realized that the main character had great charisma to be able to do this. The girls thought the blonde was beautiful and innocent, but in the end, she turned out to be a rose that hides its thorns. At that moment, they remembered that the heroine had introduced herself as Countess Falcon, and they realized that they had heard that name somewhere. They realized that this meant that the blonde was a doomed bride who had married a dead man. There were already rumors in high society that she had been sold for money and forced to marry against her will. The girls did not consider it a sin to become the mistress of such a man, because the other way out was to remain a lonely widow for the rest of her life. While they were discussing the Countess's forbidden love, they heard that Duke Fitzgerald had arrived and was waiting outside. They ran out into the street, knowing that they would now see the meeting of the Duke and Countess. The blonde looked around and, not understanding why so many people had gathered, assumed that they had come out to look at Lake. The maid saw that her mistress and the Duke needed to talk alone and said that she would wait in the carriage. Without wasting any time, the young man hugged the heroine and said that he missed her very much. The young man asked if the heroine had finished shopping, and the girl nodded, after which she asked what he was doing there. The young man shared that although the girl asked him to stay at home, he missed her so much that he could not resist and decided to come to her. The main character couldn't believe that he was so good at pretending and said that he was very reckless. The main character was sure that these words would help convince the crowd, and she was right. People began to doubt that she was simply a relative of the Duke, as they heard the words of the young man. The main character decided to consolidate her success and extended her hand to the man's cheek. Only half a day had passed and the man already looked upset, so the girl asked if something had happened. The Duke replied that a lot of bad things had been happening in the capital lately, but meeting her had given him strength. Fitzer addressed the girl as you, while she spoke to him as if she were higher in status than him, as if he, not she, was her lover. The girl was happy about the rumors, because it confirmed her image of a villain who had taken a Duke as her lover. When the main character decided it was time to go back, she saw Seiya eating popcorn. The main character turned to the girl and asked her why she was not in the salon. The woman quickly put away the bag of popcorn and stated that she was there on business. The main character immediately realized that the woman was deceiving her and most likely came to stare at her. For a girl who was married to a dead man, these rumors were just for fun, so she happily showed everyone from Lake. The blonde asked the woman if she believed her now, and the woman nodded, saying that she believed her even before she saw the Duke. After this, the woman turned to the Duke and said that they also had men's suits in their salon. The man replied that if April came here again, he would have a reason to visit them too. The cold way he responded confirmed the rumors that he was a very cold person. But in the presence of his beloved, the young man smiled at her very sweetly. Seiya, paying attention to the conversations of other people, declared that she supported the love of the Duke and Countess. Her words were very tactless, but the young people did not pay attention to it and simply thanked her. The main character and the Duke decided to return home, as the man was already uncomfortable with the increased attention. The heroine shared with the young man that she felt tired because of the worry about the possibility of making a mistake. The man saw no reason to worry, but the girl thought she might look unnatural when she stroked his cheek. At that moment, the girl remembered the man's acting skills and praised him for his excellent pretense. She noticed that when he hugged her and blushed, he looked like a real lover. He thanked her and mentally added that everything worked out thanks to her tenderness, and that she was the only one he could touch. Only he himself understood that he could not wish for anything more from the main character. He didn't dare wish for anything for April, who wouldn't benefit from it. The blonde asked the Duke why he was so cold toward Seiya, even though he was so good at pretending. April told the Duke that he was kind to her, but behaved completely differently with others. The Duke smiled because he was forced to admit that the blonde was right, and that he himself had this trait. The main character did not understand the reasons, but after the Duke admitted his trait, her mood improved. This improved her mood, as thanks to the young man, things were going much easier. The main character, having understood the situation, asked the young man if he knew about the imminent start of the social events season. The young man noticed how quickly time was flying when he realized that the event was approaching. The girl knew that the young man did not want to go, but they had to attend at least 2 or 3 events. The main character was surprised when the young man quickly agreed to her proposal. The man asked the girl why she was looking at him so intently, and she explained that she thought he didn't like noisy events. The girl realized that Lake would not be happy about this, and she realized that perhaps she was asking too much. Her face immediately showed what she was thinking, so the young man turned to her to console her. He said that she didn't need to feel guilty in front of him because he himself couldn't give up social life. This was to Duke Fitzgerald's advantage because he was a high-ranking nobleman and had certain duties. The young man said that they needed to show the others that he already had a beautiful lover, so they shouldn't bother him anymore. He was grateful to the main character because he was not going to go there because of her, but thanks to her, he could attend the event and feel comfortable. The main character was genuinely flattered to hear this. The main character thanked him and said that she was glad to hear it because she was rarely treated well and it was unusual for her. At this point, the main character decided to change the subject and asked how the search for Kern's things was going. The young man shuddered and asked why the main character was suddenly asking about this. The girl said that although she didn't know what exactly he was looking for, it seemed to her as if he was trying to hide it from prying eyes. Although they became closer to each other, the young man still did not say anything to her. Because the young man did not want to tell the girl about his plans, the main character felt as if there was an invisible wall between them. The main character patted her cheeks, reminding herself that she shouldn't bother her head with this question and that perhaps this topic was still too delicate. The main character decided to change the subject and told him that the Farcon estate would soon open its doors to visiting aristocracy. During the social season, they will provide accommodation for the nobility who have nowhere else to stay. The girl added that this was the so-called hotel business and that she would tell the details when they met with Gordon. There will be guests at the estate, which may limit the Duke's actions, but then even more rumors will start circulating about their relationship. If she succeeds, the main character will even be able to pull the county of Farcon out of debt. At first, the heroine felt uncomfortable being in the county, but now that she had hope, this place even seemed beautiful to her. When they went inside, the first thing the main character did was ask Lake if there was any magic that could repair buildings. She explained her plan to Gordon, and he concluded that they would open a hotel for aristocrats that would provide top-notch service. The heroine nodded in agreement, after which she added that, unlike other hotels, they would offer cleaning, lunches and dinners, booking tickets for performances, and even entertainment. This required the help of all the servants, so Gordon assured the girl that it was their immediate responsibility to carry out the master's orders. The headmaid nodded in agreement and stated that she thought it was a great idea too. The main character was sincerely glad to hear such support from her staff. It was clear to everyone that these duties were very important and that it was similar to the work they had done before the Count's death. Moreover, when life begins to boil in the estate again, the other servants will also have a desire to work. When the main character asked how he could help them, the girl said that he would act as a cook. The servants were also pleased with this outcome, as it meant that the workforce was properly distributed. The blonde was glad to hear this and stated that she would leave the training of the rest of the servants to them. This was not an impossible task for the butler and headmaid, so they happily set about carrying out her order. Gordon also added that there was little time left and they should hurry. He said that they needed to start training with Jaira, who was constantly idle. The girl who was making the snack was taken into the room to be taught how to be a good servant. The headmaid explained to the panicked girl that an exciting training awaited her. The girl became nervous, but the mentor looked at her and promised that they would teach her everything from scratch. The woman's look did not bode well for the girl, so she burst into tears. The blonde was glad to see that her employees enjoyed working overtime so much. The heroine thought that they looked inspired, and it was her merit, but the Duke was sure that there was another reason. At first he wanted to tell the girl about it, but in the end he kept silent, admitting to himself that he was also afraid of her, and he would have to try his best. The next day, Gordon fulfilled his promise and began the rigorous training of the servants. Jaira was trying to catch her breath after her run when she noticed 2 ladies near the threshold. The girl, seeing that they had been noticed, bowed and said that they were guests. The headmaid brought the guests into the reception room and asked if they would like to stay in the estate from today. The brunette looked down and explained that she knew the estate was only opening in a few days, but she had nowhere to go because she had been kicked out. The heroine agreed to receive the lady earlier and said that for an additional fee, she was ready to fulfill any whims of the guest. April handed the Baroness a contract that spelled out all the terms and conditions of staying at the hotel. The ladies were a little concerned about the high fee and the rules, but decided to read them anyway. The first rule was that no guests could be invited without Countess April Farkin's permission. Since the Countess would be personally selecting the guests, this meant that they could be trusted. Thus, the Baroness and her daughter agreed to the terms and indicated their readiness to pay for the entire period of stay at once. The main character was happy because she had previously been afraid that the guests would start bargaining, and so she had raised the price a little. Maintaining a businesslike smile, the girl welcomed the guests to Count Farkin's estate and expressed the hope that they would feel at home here. After all the formalities had been settled, the girl informed the guests that the maid would take them to the room and explain everything they needed along the way. A maid named Maureen greeted Baroness Roland and Lady Roland and informed them that she would serve them while they were at their estate. While the heroine was talking to the head maid, the maid Maureen explained to the girls that their things would be brought by other servants, and first they would go up to their room. The younger Roland was delighted by the fact that the servants in this house were much more courteous than those in her uncle's house. The blonde paid a lot of attention to serving the guests, so she was pleased with the positive reaction. Arriving in the garden where all the servants had gathered, the girl explained that running such a business was much more difficult than simply selling goods, so this was just the beginning. They couldn't read the guests' minds and understand whether they were happy with the service, so it was important to satisfy any requests. The main thing is the attitude of the servants towards the guests, because they were the face of the county of Farkin. When the servants assured the main character of their loyalty, the girl said that she believed in their ability to cope with their duties perfectly. The blonde asked the servants to take care of the guests while she was away from the estate. The head butler smiled at the main character and assured her that she could go with peace of mind. After some time, the main character finally arrived at her destination. The maid who was next to the main character was not sure that they had arrived where they needed to. Although the girl checked the address several times, she was still hesitant as the building looked a bit outdated compared to the description. Tired of waiting, they went inside and saw Chen, the head of the printing house. The young man asked why the dear guests had come, and the girl explained that she wanted to order an advertising sign from them. Placing an advertisement on a flyer that is distributed throughout the empire can help the hotel's business by attracting new customers and increasing brand awareness. Chen got straight to the point and asked if they wanted to pay in cash or by draft, as either method was fine. The main character handed the young man a badge and said that he could demand payment from the owner of the coat of arms. Chen was genuinely shocked, but the girl was calm because she expected such a reaction from the young man. The girl was sure that information about their relationship would spread along with the advertising. She did the right thing by showing the family crest to Seiya, who crosses paths with many aristocrats through her work, and to Chen, who publishes articles throughout the empire. Mentally asking him to spread rumors about her and Leica, the girl told the man to hang the advertisement in the most visible places. The blonde knew she couldn't spend Lake's money all the time, but right now it was important to her that they were talked about, so she used it. The girl understood that someday she would have to return all the money to Lake, and for this she would need her own funds. When she came to the bank, she was told that she needed a family stamp to get a loan. It was outrageous, but the heroine knew that aristocrats usually paid with family coats of arms, and without a seal she would not be able to even touch the money that would go to the bank. The main character was very worried that her mother-in-law would find the seal before her and use all the money she had earned. The girl could not allow others to receive the money she had worked so hard to earn. Now the main character was determined to find this item at any cost. The blonde wanted the servants to continue searching for the seal, but after the hard training, they were exhausted. As a result, the main character had to continue searching for the seal herself. As Gordon said, Count Farkin spent more time in his study than in his bedroom. It would be logical to assume that the seal is in Count Farkin's office. The main character was so carried away by the search that she did not notice how the Duke approached from behind. He asked her what she was looking for, and in surprise the heroine dropped the lamp that she had been holding in her hand all this time. Luckily, the man caught the lamp with magic before it could break. The main character looked at the young man in surprise and admitted that she was very scared. The heroine suggested that the man might have decided to take back something he had borrowed earlier. The Duke began to look away and answered rather vaguely that his visit was connected with some business. However, the main character continued to look at him with suspicion. The young man explained that he simply couldn't sleep that day and decided to go for a walk. During a walk, the young man noticed a blonde who was sneaking around like a cat. He decided to follow her out of curiosity and concern for her safety. The girl could understand the man's curiosity, but she could not understand why he was worried about her. When the young man explained himself, the girl complimented him, saying that he saw well in the dark, judging by the fact that he never stumbled while walking behind her. The young man thanked the girl for the compliment and asked what she was looking for in the late Kern's office. At first, the girl did not want to tell the young man, but the Duke assured her that if she told, he would help her, and if not, he would pretend that he had not seen anything and leave. At first, the girl hesitated, but then decided that it would be easier to search together, and the Duke could perhaps use magic to immediately detect the seal. The girl told the young man about the seal of the head of Farkon, which he hid somewhere. The blonde added that the head of Farkon hid the seal so well that she could not find it, and without the seal she would not be able to freely handle finances. The Duke nodded in understanding, because he knew that without the seal the girl's abilities were limited. The blonde asked the Duke if he could help her find the seal, and promised that she would help him in return if he succeeded in the task. The young man smiled and said that he could manage without her help, so they decided it was better to focus on her problem. At first, the girl wanted to insist on her own, but then she decided that the Duke perhaps simply did not want to say what exactly he was looking for. The main character realized that she had nothing left to lose and decided to focus on the positive aspects. The girl said she would look on the table, and the young man could check the picture frames, which were too high for her. But the man shook his head, not believing that the girl was really going to check every corner. The heroine explained that Gordon and Nora had already tried to find the seal several times, but to no avail. The Duke was sure that the seal was hidden in a secluded place, and if the girl looked for it like that, she would only waste time. Because of the young man's words, the girl thought that he had changed his mind about helping her, and she frowned. Seeing that his words upset the girl, the young man said that he would now use search magic. The main character immediately remembered that the young man had already used this same magic before. It was the same magic that the young man had used in the garden some time ago. When she mentioned this, the young man praised her for her good memory. Since he confirmed her words, the girl came to the conclusion that he was looking for something in the garden that night. It was all very suspicious, especially considering that the young man did not reveal what exactly he was looking for. Although the girl had known him for some time, she still couldn't figure out what was on his mind. She felt irritated, but eventually decided that there was no point in wasting time guessing if he didn't want to tell her. She decided to cheer herself up and observe a phenomenon she had never seen in her past life. However, at that moment she opened her eyes in surprise, realizing that there was not a magical light around the young man, but a strange glow that was not associated with magic. She rubbed her eyes, thinking she was imagining things, but the light was even brighter and clearer than before. The Duke asked what had happened, but the girl shook her head and said that she had just gotten something in her eye. She decided not to talk about her fears because she was not sure about them. The girl said she may have opened her eyes too wide when she saw a light that reminded her of the main character. The Duke looked at her in surprise, and the girl explained that the light was as beautiful as the young man himself. Raising her index finger, the girl said that the atmosphere was very similar to what it was before, and it looked simply wonderful. Her frank words made the young man blush to the tips of his ears. The main character did not expect such a violent reaction and awkwardly looked away. The girl asked him to calm down and tell her more about how this magic would help them find the seal. After clearing his throat, the young man said that this was exactly what he wanted to share. The young man placed his fingers on the bridge of his nose and asked magic to indicate the location of Count Farkin's seal. When a beam of light appeared, the young man said that if they followed it, they could find out where what they were looking for was. The light led them to the shelves, and the girl assumed that the seal was hidden between the books. The girl suggested looking at all the books, but the young man suggested that the seal was not hidden in the books. The man explained that his search magic was not that simple, and if the seal were here, the light would point to a specific book. When magic pointed the young man to the table, he opened the drawer and began to rummage through it. Apparently, at that moment, some mechanism was triggered, and a secret door opened behind the main character. The young man approached the door and looked inside, curious to see what was there. The main character did not dare to go inside, but the Duke took the initiative into his own hands. The young man offered her his arm to accompany her, as it was dark inside. The protagonist used magic and lit a lamp so that they could see in the dark. As they walked inside, the girl asked him how he knew about the secret room. The man smiled and explained that it was something of an unspoken rule of every clan, and they often made secret rooms and devices in the house leading there. The secret rooms were only told to the direct heirs, so neither Gordon nor Nora knew about them. The main character suggested that the man use magic to make the room brighter. The young man said it was no problem, and the light grew even brighter, illuminating the room. The blonde looked around in embarrassment and realized that it was too empty to be a secret room. A chill ran down the heroine's spine, because there was no gold or jewelry in the room, only temple attributes. The young Count Kern hid such trinkets, and the girl assumed that he was a deeply religious man. The Duke smiled and said that these things were of great value to the Count. The blonde looked at the Duke, assuming that these things were expensive and she could sell them. The young man warned the blonde that getting involved with the temple was dangerous and would cause problems. The heads of the Farcon family of counts have historically been the keepers of the temple's records, but several generations ago they were excommunicated for misappropriating property. The main character was outraged by the fact that she got a husband who not only had a debt, but was also excommunicated from the church. The man suggested that perhaps the items that were hidden were smuggled in. The heroine agreed, and added that problems might arise, so it was better to take the seal and leave here. At that moment, the girl noticed the whip and wondered what she was doing there. The young man looked at her warily and asked if she was going to take the whip with her. The girl looked at him menacingly, and the man decided to change the subject, saying that the seal was in the box. The main character smiled and said that he would try to open the box. Just as he was thinking about how to open the box, he heard a strange cracking sound next to him. The one who made this noise turned out to be the main character, who opened the box herself. The Duke looked at her apathetically and declared that, in fact, it was not called opening, but breaking. The blonde didn't take his words seriously, because the box was still old and it was important for her to achieve her goal. She was overjoyed when she found the seal of the Farcon family. The girl pressed the seal to her face, asking her if she knew what she had gone through. Now she could go to the bank without worrying about her property being taken away. The main character found the seal and invited the young man to return. The young man looked at the box again and said that since they were here, they should check what was inside. When the Duke opened the box, the young men saw that there was a torn sheet of paper inside. When the man decided to see what was written on the paper, it burned before his eyes. The main character stared at the young man in confusion and asked why he set fire to the leaf. The young man did not answer the main character and stared into space, as if he had lost the meaning of life. The main character got scared and started shaking the young man to bring him to his senses. When the young man finally responded, the main character asked him why he suddenly froze and why he burned the piece of paper. The Duke explained that he had not burned the paper, and the girl suggested that a spell had been cast on it. The girl asked what was written on the piece of paper, but the man smiled and said that the piece of paper burned before he had time to read it. The Duke turned towards the exit and invited the girl to leave. The main character agreed with the Duke, and they decided to discuss everything else tomorrow. At that moment, the lamp that was hanging above their heads suddenly broke, and everything around was plunged into darkness. The blonde panicked, not understanding why the magic suddenly stopped working. The blonde called out to Lake in a frightened voice and asked what had happened, but he did not answer her. The girl looked down and saw that the young man was gasping for breath and clutching his chest. The blonde realized that something was wrong with the young man and asked what hurt him. The young man smiled through the pain and assured the girl that he was okay. But the main character immediately noticed that he was lying to her and said that she needed to call a doctor. The man removed the girl's hand from his face and told her that he was really okay and that she shouldn't worry. After this, the young man said nothing more and disappeared. While the main character looked at the empty room in surprise, Fitzer collapsed to the floor. The young man frowned unconsciously, but he didn't have the strength to open his eyes. 3 small figures approached the noise and stared at the young man. The 3 dolls looked at the main character with concern, assuming that their owner was ill. The dolls ran up to the young man and began trying to reach him. To their horror, the Duke did not move and continued to lie unconscious. A servant came running to the noise and saw that the owner of the magic tower was lying unconscious on the floor. The assistant lifted the body of the owner of the magic tower, wondering if he was really alive. The thought that the young man had died caused the man to experience unbearable panic. One of the dolls, panicking, went berserk and hit the assistant, after which she declared that the owner was not dead. The young man was distracted and did not notice how the Duke fell out of his arms and hit his head. Seeing this, the dolls became angry and said that the owner hit his head because of the assistant. The young man tried to justify himself and explain that he did not do it on purpose. At this moment, the Duke came to his senses and asked the young man named Rito to be silent. Seeing that the Duke had finally come to his senses, Rito still couldn't believe that he was alive. The Duke again asked him to stop making noise and put him to bed instead. The servant nodded and assured the young man that he would help him get to bed. Gently holding the Duke, the servant asked if it would not be better to go to the estate and see a doctor at the same time. While everyone was worried about the Duke, the protagonist assured them that he would sort it out himself and that they should not worry. The dolls surrounded the young man, making him feel uncomfortable. He asked Rito to remove the dolls, but the servant did not want to do this, realizing that they were just worried about him. Pointing to one of the dolls, he asked the man to look into its clear, pure eyes. In the end, the young man gave in and could not refuse the girl when she began to cry. At this point, Rito again became worried that the tower owner's condition was not entirely good. Rito wanted to ask the young man about this, but he ordered him to be silent and not to jump to conclusions. Realizing his mistake, the young man asked for forgiveness for his frivolity. The Duke ordered the young man to stop getting on his nerves and leave his room. Before leaving, Rito reminded the man that he could call him if he needed anything. Everyone was very concerned about the young man's condition, but he refused to admit that he was ill. At that moment, a young man with bright red hair and equally red eyes entered the room through the window. He thought that the Duke had done something wrong again and brought himself to this state. The young man decided that there was no other way out, cut his hand and brought it to the man's mouth. The Duke said that it would be better for the young man to kill him than to force him to drink his blood. Realizing that the Duke was being stubborn, the stranger said that he would like to kill him, but could not do it. He reminded the young man that if he didn't drink, things would get even worse for him. After some time, the main character finally calmed down and even got up from his bed. Seeing that the Duke had calmed down, the red-haired man said that he considered him his friend, so he should listen carefully to his advice. The Duke did not want to listen to the red-haired man, and he, anticipating such a reaction, picked up the doll and said that loneliness could not be filled with such trifles. Clutching the doll in his hand, the red-haired man added that they could not replace true friends, and the Duke would not be able to escape his fate. He reminded the Duke of his duty, and that only by fulfilling it could he be freed from his suffering. The stranger thought that he had chosen a good time, otherwise Fitzer would have remained here alone and would soon have died. The Duke and the red-haired man were well acquainted, and both realized that Fitzer had not specifically asked for help. When Fitzer sighed heavily, thinking that his friend had overdone it, he declared that there was no need to thank him. Waving goodbye, the red-haired man wished the young man a speedy recovery. The next morning, the Baroness and her daughter greeted the Countess and noticed that something had happened to her. The ladies assumed that the main character had been fighting bugs all night, and therefore had not gotten enough sleep. The blonde laughed and assured the girls that these were not bugs, but just nightmares. She was so worried about Lake that she couldn't sleep a wink, wondering if he was okay. Understanding that she shouldn't show concern, the girl asked the Baroness and her daughter how they slept. When the girls replied that everything was fine, the girl suggested that they go to the dining room. The Duke entered the room, and the main character, overcome with anxiety, hurried towards him. The blonde began to scold the young man and say that she was very worried when he disappeared without warning. She was worried not only about being alone in a dark place, but also about what might happen to him. When she said this, the young man took her hand and assured her that nothing serious had happened. When he said that there was no need to worry, it made the girl even more angry. The girl grabbed him by the collar and asked how she could not worry when the man disappeared right before her eyes. At this time, the Baroness and her daughter watched the unfolding drama. Now the girls finally understood why the Countess had dark circles under her eyes. The Baroness asked her daughter to be quiet, as the most interesting moment had now arrived, but they did not even suspect that the blonde heard them. The Baroness asked Maureen to escort the guests to the dining room, as it would be impolite to leave them alone. When the young people were alone, the girl turned to the Duke again. With a serious expression on her face, the girl asked the Duke to explain everything that happened yesterday. The young man pretended not to understand what she was talking about and asked for clarification. Then the girl patiently asked him to tell her what had happened the previous night and whether he had visited the doctor. The Duke repeated his previous words that there was nothing to worry about. He added that there was no one there anyway, so they should stop talking about it and have breakfast. The girl's expression darkened even more when she realized that he thought she had brought up the topic on purpose so that others would see them. Now, realizing what he was thinking about her, the girl was offended and getting up from her seat, headed towards the exit. Realizing his mistake, the Duke jumped up from his seat and grabbed the girl by the wrist to prevent her from leaving. He apologized and said he didn't mean anything by it. The Duke explained that few people were worried about him, so he was confused and spoke without thinking. When the Duke asked for forgiveness again, the girl turned to him and said that he could have just confessed honestly. At this moment, the main character realized that the girl was not offended by him. The girl smiled and said that the Duke had lied to her all the time, so she decided to try to do the same. The man sighed heavily and admitted that he thought she was offended, which is why he got so upset. The blonde replied that if he didn't want this to actually happen, then he'd better think before answering. The girl asked him again if everything was okay, and the young man, smiling brightly, assured her that everything was fine with him. The young man told her that he had suffered from asthma as a child, and that recently he had been overexerting himself too often. The main character, taught by bitter experience, did not believe the young man and looked at him doubtfully. The heroine asked him if he had lied to her, and the young man, realizing that he had been found out, confessed to what he had done. The girl felt a little uncomfortable, but fortunately the young man immediately confessed. April remembered him mentioning that no one had ever cared about him before, and he probably had no one to rely on as a child. The young man grew up in unfavorable conditions, so it was not easy for him to trust another person. The girl decided to forget about it and suggested doing something different. The blonde understood that he couldn't fully open up to her because they had only met recently, so he tried to hide his problems. She said he didn't have to tell her everything and asked him to just not lie to her. The girl didn't want to destroy the trust between them, so she asked him to promise at least this. The girl's words deeply touched the young man, and he was grateful to her for them. At that moment, the girl took his hand and said that if he wanted to share something with her, he could safely tell her everything. The girl assured the young man that she would listen to him with understanding and immediately forget. The heroine smiled and asked the young man how he felt about this proposal. Fitzer also smiled and showed with his whole appearance that he agreed. After they discussed everything, the girl invited him to go have breakfast. Since they were both hungry, they immediately headed to the dining room. They noticed that the Baroness and her daughter had already started eating. The heroine noticed the brunette's expression and immediately realized that she was expecting something special. April asked Lady Eileen if something was bothering her, since she was staring at them so intently. The girl, not at all embarrassed, asked for forgiveness for her tactlessness. She explained that she became curious as to why the young people looked so happy. The girl asked directly whether Duke Fitzer and Countess Farcon were lovers. Hearing her question, the Baroness was horrified and immediately asked the Countess and the Duke for forgiveness. The Baroness tried to explain that Eileen didn't mean anything bad, but the blonde interrupted her, saying that she already knew that perfectly well. The blonde turned to the young man and said that Eileen was not mistaken. When the man saw her sincere smile, he thought that even if she was pretending to be his lover in front of others, he did not feel a drop of shame or irritation. The man also smiled at the girl and confirmed her words that they were a couple. Instead of feeling irritated, the young man, on the contrary, would like to have such a lover. After some time, the main character watched the Duke walking through the garden. The main character watched the Duke for several days, but did not notice any signs of the state she saw that night. The girl was genuinely happy with the fact that Lake looked normal. The young man behaved as cheerfully as he had at their first meeting. So the main character couldn't help but feel relieved that he wasn't upset. While the main character's thoughts were occupied with the Duke, someone knocked on her room door, interrupting her train of thought. The main character allowed the maid to enter the room. The brunette greeted her mistress and said that she brought the invitations that were sent to her today. After rumors of her relationship with the Duke spread, she began to receive numerous invitations. It seemed that everyone was interested in looking at the woman who had attracted the attention of the Duke himself. The girl represented their curiosity, because this woman was the same unfortunate bride who married a dead man. If her popularity is seen as a means of advertising the hotel, it would be more profitable for her to accept the invitations. However, it would still be better to start participating in social life when the season began. The maid was surprised that the main character didn't even want to read the invitation, so she asked her about it. The blonde explained that she wasn't planning on going out in public anytime soon, so there was no point in reading the invitation. At this moment, the maid pulled out one of the invitations and said that it was from the Marquise of Contevel. The girl explained that Baroness Roland and her daughter, Lady Irene, would be present at the ball, so the heroine would feel comfortable. The blonde said she still had no plans to go anywhere because she didn't have any free time. The heroine noticed that the maid looked upset when she left and assumed that Joan wanted to get to the social event as soon as possible. While the main character was making a note to ask the maid a question the next time they met, the Duke entered the room. The main character was genuinely surprised to see the Duke because she was told that he had left. The heroine told the Duke that she knew about his plans to leave today and asked if anything unexpected had happened. Fitzer explained that he still had time and changed the subject. The Duke asked if there had been many requests for check-in at the hotel, as it was due to start soon. The main character said that thanks to the advertising there were many applications, and they even had to hold a selection. The girl said that 6 families would live there, including the family of Baron Roland. The 3 male to 3 female ratio was good, so perhaps they could see a new pair born before the end of the season. If the hotel has good reviews, the girl will be able to pay off all her debts and get rich. It all happened thanks to the Duke's family mark, so the girl thanked him again for lending it to her. She decided to return the mark, since they had already found the seal of the head of the family, and now she herself would be able to exchange bills for money. To her surprise, the man said she could keep the mark until the season ended. This way, she will be able to show the mark to other aristocrats, which will add mystery to their relationship. The girl could also not repay the debt and spend as much as she wanted, because the young man was rich, and this money meant nothing to him. Having received permission from the young man, the heroine immediately thought about going to the boutique to try on new dresses. The girl imagined the face of the store owner when she heard that the heroine wanted to try on all the dresses from the collection. At that moment, Gordon entered the room and announced that it was time for the Duke to leave, as the carriage had arrived. The young man stood up from his seat and complained that time was flying by too quickly. The main character also stood up and said that she wanted to see the young man off, so she would go down with him. The Duke turned to her and said that she did not have to see him off if she did not want to. The girl replied that she couldn't help but accompany him. While the young people were going down, the heroine asked the Duke when he would return. When the young man replied that he would come for dinner, the girl decided to wait for his arrival. However, the Duke asked the girl to start dinner without him if she was very hungry. The protagonist smiled at the girl goodbye before getting into the carriage. Before getting into the carriage, the main character smiled at the girl. At that moment, the main character turned around and noticed that she was being watched. Seeing Lady Eileen watching her, the girl decided that she couldn't miss this opportunity. The girl kissed the young man on the cheek and asked him to be careful. The young man was puzzled by this behavior and looked at the girl in surprise. The blonde, unaware that she had upset the young man, wondered whether Lady Eileen had seen it. The main character thought that it would be even better if Lady Eileen told others about this. As the heroine expected, Eileen saw this scene and thought that the Duke and Countess were perfect for each other. On the opening day of the hotel, the main character warmly welcomed the guests and asked them to feel at home. The main character said that she would do everything possible to make the guests feel comfortable. The heroine noticed that some of the guests were feeling awkward and decided to defuse the situation. The girl said that if the guests communicate with other people, they will be able to find suitable company and perhaps even meet their destiny. The main character pointed to the butler and the headmaid and said that servants would be assigned to them who would show them the rooms. The girl could not help but praise herself for being a true professional in her field. At this time, one of the girls looked at the mansion of Countess Farcon, which had been so popular lately. To be honest, the girl was not from the capital, so the talk about the relationship between Duke Fitzer and the sold bride seemed untrue to her. But now she saw with her own eyes how young people communicate and look very close. The Duke, who had previously looked at everyone coldly, now looked at the Countess with loving eyes. Now the girl began to think that the rumors that the blonde had bewitched him were just someone's evil invention. At that moment, a maid approached her and said that she would take her to the room. The brunette smiled softly at Lady Charlotte and informed her that she would serve her while she was visiting the Farcon estate. She took the girl's luggage but did not expect it to be so heavy and fell. So, although Jaira said that the lady could rely on her, she did not inspire confidence. The maid said that she would sort out Lady Charlotte's things, and in the meantime she could look around. The girl didn't expect much from the estate, but the room looked quite decent. Just as she was thinking about this, there was a knock on her room door and another girl entered. It was Eileen who said that she was really looking forward to the others because she was bored. When the girls introduced themselves to each other, Eileen suggested that Charlotte be friends because they were staying at the same hotel and would be spending a lot of time together. Charlotte agreed to befriend Eileen, who took her to explore the estate. At first, Charlotte was unhappy because she wanted to rest, but in the end, she really enjoyed their walk. The massage and the delicious dessert were also good, but what impressed Eileen most was the real feast. She handed Charlotte a bouquet of flowers and was sure that Charlotte would like everything too. The girl was stunned by her enthusiasm and quietly thanked her for her concern. At that moment, they noticed the Countess and the Duke, who were also walking in the garden. The young people smiled softly at each other, and their smiles made them look like a perfect couple. Charlotte wondered if the two were truly in love, as she believed that a man like the Duke would not date a woman who was already married. Lady Eileen said that their feelings were genuine because it was impossible to pretend to be as happy as the Duke looked. The girl began to embellish the facts and said that the heroine could not live without the Duke and that they were never apart for a minute, passionately kissing on every walk. She closed her eyes dreamily and admitted that she too would like to meet her destiny and love as much as they did. Charlotte looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she meant. After looking at her for a while, the girl noticed that she looked like a child. Meanwhile, the main character asked the young people if they enjoyed the meal. The girl deliberately did not interfere in their conversation so that they could become friends. The young people smiled and said that they already addressed each other by their first names. The heroine suggested playing a simple game over a cup of coffee in order to become even more friendly with the young people. When they sat down, the main character asked Lake to sit opposite her. After that, the girl said that to play the love spell, you need to split into pairs. When the girl gave the signal, the young men had to point to the one they liked at first sight. Those who pointed at each other were paired up, and then the game began. The main character explained the rules and then suggested to begin. Eileen pointed to the young man opposite her, and he did the same. The main character exclaimed in delight, realizing that they already had their first pair. The girl sincerely congratulated Lady Eileen and Mr. Hades. At this point, the blonde explained to Charlotte, who had chosen Lady Eileen, that she needed to choose one of the gentlemen opposite. Since everyone was a little confused, the girl suggested that those who had not united try again. The girl confessed to the Duke that it was a lot of fun, and the young people quickly grasped the rules of the game due to their age. The game was tense and the bell almost broke at the end. The Duke explained that this happened because they were too carried away by the game, and they were interested in calling each other by their first names. The heroine noticed that the young man was having so much fun that he forgot about his reputation and enjoyed the game. Although the heroine organized this game to help the guests find their partner, the man was glad that they were on the same team, and she addressed him by name. Because he was so happy, they never won, and the man apologized for not being smart enough. The girl replied that they didn't do all this for the sake of winning, so she was glad that he liked it. The main character admitted that she was pleased to see the man laugh. The next day, one of the young men complimented the heroine, saying that she knew a lot of interesting games. The blonde was glad to hear that time had flown by for the young man in her estate. The heroine asked what game they would play next, and Eileen asked to play the same game as yesterday. While they were discussing games, the main character entered the room. The heroine looked at him in surprise, wondering what had happened. As the young man walked towards her, the girl assumed that he wanted to join them. At that moment, the man approached the girl and said that he came to take away what she always does for him. The girl stared at the man in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Finally realizing what he wanted from her, the girl smiled and kissed him on the cheek. The display of affection confused the young people. At the moment when the young people were looking away in embarrassment, Eileen accidentally met Mr. Hadsom's gaze. The brunette looked down in embarrassment, and the blonde quickly noticed this, rejoicing at her success. The main character thought that if this continues, then next time there will be twice as many guests. As the girl was leaving, she asked the Duke to be careful, not suspecting that he would leave immediately after she left. Having said goodbye to the guests, the Duke set off on his journey to meet his acquaintance. The young man noticed that the Duke was in a good mood, but he asked him not to pay attention and not to go into details. To change the subject, the Duke asked his subordinate how things were going with the matter entrusted to him. The young man, who was just about to tell the story, asked the Duke to wait a little. He began to sort through the documents and at that moment realized that he could not find the item he needed anywhere. He started to sort through the documents, and at that moment he realized that he couldn't find the thing he needed anywhere. It was a crystal on a chain, black as the night itself. The man said that he had conducted several experiments, but was still unable to understand what the crystal was made of. He admitted that he even tried to break the crystal that the Duke brought with a hammer, but as expected, nothing worked. A few days before this, the main character took on a case that required a magician. While the young man was thinking about what had happened, a knight approached him and asked the reason for his arrival. Then the young man told the knight that a request for a magician had been received at the tower because people were missing. The knight told the young man that crimes had become more frequent on the outskirts of the slums near the communal areas. It seems as if the criminals are moving towards the aristocrats in the imperial castle. There weren't many missing people and no one was really looking for them, but it was worth conducting an investigation first. The protagonist understood the seriousness of the situation and stated that he would conduct a thorough investigation. The knight apologized to the young man for the trouble he had caused and explained that he had been expecting another magician to arrive. The Duke replied that it was not the man's fault and that in fact he simply happened to be the most unoccupied. With a snap of his finger, the young man directed the stream of light in a certain direction. The brunette, who was a little familiar with magic, immediately realized that it was a search spell. At this time, the Duke looked seriously in that direction, not understanding why his magic did not work as usual. The beam led him to a specific object, although usually search magic cannot catch something like this. The item emitted a very strong aura, so the young man decided to take it with him. The young man already had experience in such matters, so he immediately realized that it was a black pendulum. Remembering how he found this pendulum, the young man suggested that the pendulum absorbs human blood. When his subordinate heard his suggestion, he was afraid that the Duke would now take his blood. The young man remembered the main character, who, when she was scared, made the same expression on her face. The protagonist realized that he had serious symptoms and decided to change the subject. The man cleared his throat and thanked his subordinate for his concern for his well-being. The other young man stared at him incredulously, thinking he had misheard. The Duke looked down in embarrassment and said that if he hadn't heard, then there was no point in paying attention. But Retta did not want to give up and asked his master to repeat it again. The protagonist ordered Retta to let go, as he was already starting to get on his nerves. When the protagonist stated that it was time for him to leave, another young man suggested that he was already leaving for the Farkan estate. The Duke reminded the young man that he had not yet found what he was looking for at the Farkan estate. Retta was sure that there was nothing in the Farkan estate and suggested that the young man move out. The protagonist immediately became gloomy and asked why Retta suddenly started talking about this. The young man immediately hesitated and began to explain that the man had a lot of things to do. Moreover, strange rumors have already begun to circulate among the visitors of the tower. Visitors to the tower asked about his relationship with Countess Farkan because they were interested in whether there was really something between them. The young man had to mumble something unintelligible every time, and it was very difficult. To his surprise, the protagonist ordered him to say that these rumors were true. When the man stared at him in shock, the protagonist repeated once again that everything was so, and that this was exactly the kind of relationship he had with the Countess. Retta's mouth opened wide in surprise, as he still didn't believe the fact that his master had a relationship with the Countess. He had known his master for a long time and was sure of the fact that he did not like women. The Duke interrupted him and clarified that he disliked not only women, but people in general. When Retta pointed out that the Duke was also human, he smiled without embarrassment. The young man was not ashamed to admit the fact that he did not love himself. The protagonist asked his assistant if he had seen April in person. When the assistant replied that he had not yet had a chance to meet April, the protagonist said that he would understand everything when he saw her with his own eyes. The main character smiled softly and said that she was very beautiful and smart. While Retta was wondering about Countess Farkan's character, the Duke stated that he should have invited April here. When the man asked why he was doing this, the Duke explained that he wanted to introduce her to them. Although Retta understood that April might be curious to see the tower, he reminded the man that it was not open to just anyone. Assistant Lake was also concerned about whether they would be able to talk to the woman normally. Retta thought the Duke would console him, but he nodded and stated that they had indeed never interacted with women. Before inviting April, the protagonist decided to ask her first. The protagonist was determined and really wanted to invite April to the tower. The Duke decided to go to the estate because he needed to practice with the dolls in his room. As he watched the Duke leave, Retta remembered the words that if a person begins to do something he has never done before, it brings his end closer. After some time, the main character decided to take a walk, so he left his room. While the young man was walking through the night garden, he noticed someone. This person turned out to be the main character, who also decided to take a walk in the garden. The young man quietly approached the main character and asked what she was doing here in the garden. The girl screamed in surprise and quickly looked at the young man, asking when he had arrived. The young man said that he had just arrived, and again asked the girl what she was doing in the garden. At that moment, the main character put her hand to his mouth to shut him up. The main character asked the young man to be quiet, because a very important moment was happening now. The Duke looked at her in surprise, noticing that her hair was wet. The protagonist reached out to her hair to dry it discreetly. The girl noticed that the main character touched her hair and asked what he did. The young man smiled mysteriously and said that she imagined it. When the man was so close to the main character, he felt the delicate scent of a rose. He blushed but quickly pulled himself together, realizing that he shouldn't give in to this feeling. At that moment, the young people noticed something and stared ahead. Not far from them, at a fairly close distance, stood Mr. Hudds and Lady Eileen. The embarrassed young man turned to Lady Alina and asked if she would agree to be his partner for the entire season. The girl looked at him shyly, not expecting such an offer from a modest young man. Since their feelings were mutual, the girl agreed to the young man's proposal. They had no idea that the main character was watching them like a spectator in a theater. The main character understood everything when she saw how embarrassed they were when they met each other's eyes. But she didn't expect it to happen so quickly and expressed hope that they would announce their engagement soon. Meanwhile, Mr. Hudds admitted that he made the right decision to stay at the Farcon estate. He explained that he was glad of this because it was here that he met Lady Eileen. Since it was already dark, the man became worried about how the girl would return alone and offered to walk her home. Lady Eileen happily accepted his offer, and the young people left. The main character couldn't believe that they were already leaving because it had only just begun. The heroine believed that Hades should have taken the initiative and kissed Lady Eileen. The main character added that they were supposed to hug, but the man next to her did not understand what she was talking about. Only then did the girl remember that they were in a world of romantic fantasy. The main character tried to explain what it is like when two lovers are alone and surrounded by a romantic atmosphere. Young people who have romantic feelings for each other kiss and hug. Hearing that a romantic atmosphere was needed for a kiss, the young man couldn't help but compare it to their situation. Thinking about this, the protagonist blushed and looked at his feet with excitement. Realizing that his thoughts had taken a wrong turn, the man hit his head to get rid of them. Seeing that the man had hit himself on the head, the girl anxiously asked why he was harming himself. The girl tried to get an answer out of him, but the man was not going to tell her anything. The young man understood that he could not tell the girl the reason for his embarrassment. The girl did not see what happened, so she could not understand how the man could have hit himself so hard. The main character was upset that the man hurt his handsome face. The young man, blushing, replied that these words were more suitable for the girl, not for him. Although the girl agreed with the young man, she still noted that he should also take care of his face. At that moment, the girl remembered that the young man had hurt himself right after she had started talking about kissing and hugging. The main character was sure that men could not be embarrassed by just the mention of kissing. The girl touched the young man's chest and asked if he had imagined it. April admitted that the man doesn't look like he has devils in his head. The girl wanted to continue teasing the man, but the next words died on her lips when she looked at the Duke. The young man did not deny the girl's words and turned away in embarrassment. With his behavior, the young man silently confirmed that the girl's joking remark was accurate. The main character couldn't believe that the man reacted that way to her joke. There was no one near them, so the girl could not understand who he imagined kissing. At that moment, the thought flashed through her mind that the man was imagining kissing her. The main character stumbled in surprise, but the man managed to catch her. Staring at the young man's face, which was so close, the heroine continued to think about this. The main character remembered her own words about two lovers who found themselves alone. The girl recently explained to the Duke that in a romantic setting, lovers are more likely to kiss. The main character felt deeply embarrassed and quickly moved away from the Duke. Turning away, the girl quickly apologized, explaining that she was simply very surprised. In her mind, she wondered what had happened and why the Duke had tried to kiss her. At that moment, the idea occurred to her to pretend she didn't know anything and close her eyes. But she immediately pulled herself together, reminding herself that they weren't in that kind of relationship. They stood silently opposite each other, and the girl did not know what to do in this awkward situation. The heroine decided that she needed to change the topic of conversation first. After clearing her throat, the girl apologized for hitting him and asked if he was okay. The young man also looked away, and after a short silence replied that he had indeed received minor injuries. The main character asked the young man about his misophonia, because before that he was always afraid of dirt. Whatever he said, the heroine had been touching him a lot lately, so she assumed that he had almost managed to get rid of his phobia. The young man replied that that would be great, but complete relief was still a long way off. The man said that he touched another person today, which immediately made his mood worse. After his words, the blonde suggested that in fact it was not easy for him or her to touch, not to mention other people. Just when the girl thought that he was just trying to adjust to her, the young man gently took her hand. Kissing her knuckles, the young man declared that, unlike other people, he did not find touching her disgusting. Seeing her confusion, the young man added that he himself did not understand the reason for this phenomenon. The situation was getting stranger and stranger, so the girl decided that she had to leave quickly before it got any worse. She said that she was very hungry, so she needed to return to the estate quickly. The main character wanted to see her off, but the girl said that it was not far and he shouldn't worry. The girl walked quickly so that the man would not have time to follow her, but she was still thinking about this strange incident. Having burst into the estate, the girl decided that she shouldn't give in to emotions, since today's incident was an accident, and neither she nor Lake were capable of dating anyone. While the girl's thoughts were occupied with conflicting emotions, Gordon wondered why she had burst inside so suddenly. The main character, feeling incredibly embarrassed, said that she was very hungry and asked him, The heroine couldn't help but blame herself for the fact that, because of her emotions, she had ruined her reputation in the estate. When the girl looked at the table, she thought that Lake's food looked excellent as always. She forgot that only Lake could cook such food, and so there was no point in her avoiding him. While the girl was enjoying her meal in the dining room, someone knocked, interrupting her. Gordon apologized for interrupting her and said that she had an important letter. The main character stared with curiosity at the coat of arms depicted on the letter. Both the protagonist and the heroine immediately realized that the letter was from the Imperial Palace. The young man could not believe that time had flown by so quickly and that the time for this event had already arrived. The main character nodded and said that she had received an invitation to a ball at the Imperial Palace. April looked at the man and said that she had to attend the ball at the Imperial Palace. In fact, April deliberately did not appear in high society in order to shine at the ball. Upon opening the envelope, the girl was surprised to find not one, but 2 invitations. She told the young man that his invitation had somehow ended up in her hands. The girl asked the young man why the invitation was not sent to the Fitzer estate or to the Magic Tower. The protagonist smiled softly and said that perhaps the palace had recognized their relationship. Hearing his words, the girl tensed up, but the man hastened to admit that he was just joking and most likely, invitations were sent to all the places where he might be. This was done deliberately so that the Duke could not fail to appear at the palace under the pretext that he had not received an invitation. The girl wondered how many events he had missed for everything to be so serious. The main character asked the young man to teach her this trick so that in the future she would not have to go to events if she did not want to. The blonde hoped that he would go with her, but judging by his conversation, she decided to find out in advance whether he could keep her company. Without any further hesitation, the heroine asked the young man directly whether he would go to the ball this time. The man nodded and admitted that he would have been upset if the blonde had not gone to the ball with him. It was a huge relief, because the girl wouldn't have been able to choose another partner anyway. The girl jokingly said that she was already planning to take the skeleton with her in case the young man refused to go with her. The young man suggested that it was because she was the bride of a ghost, but the heroine denied this and said that she had married a spirit. At this point, the girl changed the subject and asked if the palace knew about them if the palace had sent an invitation for Lake to come to the Farcon estate. The young man nodded and said that there were also people living in the palace who spread gossip, and there were those who were willing to listen to them. The main character was concerned about the fact that the young man could be severely punished for this. The rumors concerned not a simple citizen, but a young man who was the only representative of the ducal family in the empire. The heroine was already imagining how the emperor would scold him because the duke had fallen in love with a girl he couldn't be with. At this point, the Duke tried to calm her down and said that there was nothing to worry about in these rumors because they were just meaningless words that went in one ear and out the other. The heroine confirmed her thoughts that the young man lives for today because he considers the emperor's words meaningless. The young man said that there was no need to worry about something that had not yet happened and wanted to add something else, but stopped at the last moment. The girl wanted to hear what the young man wanted to say, but he changed the subject. The protagonist stated that it was a good event and invited the girl to drink to him. When the main character announced that a bottle of good wine had been found in the estate, the girl immediately agreed to his proposal. The girl said that she had not drunk wine for a long time and suggested moving to the balcony because the weather was wonderful. The young man agreed that it sounded good and they headed straight to the balcony. Turning to the Duke, the girl said that it was better to drink wine in just such a setting. At that moment, the girl remembered that they had forgotten the glasses, but the Duke said that he would quickly arrange everything. The Duke extended his hand and a magic circle appeared above his palm. Immediately after this, a glass, already filled with wine, appeared in the girl's hands. The main character thanked the young man and admitted that magic was indeed very convenient. When the girl was about to take a sip, she noticed a mysterious glow around the young man, reminiscent of caterpillars, and this strange phenomenon haunted her. The girl looked intently at the young man, wondering what was going on around the man. Because of this, the young man felt like he had something stuck to his face, and he asked her about it. The blonde started rubbing her eyes and said that maybe it was the darkness or the reflection. The young man was sure that the girl had good eyesight, but she said that sometimes everything seemed blurry. The girl wanted to see a doctor, but the man said that, unfortunately, there was no specialist in the capital who understood her problem and dealt exclusively with eyes. The main character suggested that the reason could be that the man's hair color is lighter than that of other people. The heroine explained to the young man that she saw some kind of glow around him. The protagonist asked for details, and the girl said that something resembling caterpillars seemed to be wriggling around him. April had never seen anything like it before, so it was difficult to explain to her what it actually looked like. After joking that, since it was only visible near him, it meant he was shining too brightly, the man recommended the girl wear glasses. "Young man, I think that this accessory will suit the main character very well and will give her a smart look." The main character replied that everything is not so bad and that there are no problems in everyday life. The young people were so engrossed in their conversation that they forgot about the glasses of wine in their hands. Having taken the first sip, the main character was amazed by the exquisite taste of the wine. The man asked the girl if she liked the wine, and she replied that she did not like tart wines, but this wine seemed sweet and pleasant to the taste. When the girl was about to ask if all the wine served in the palace was so delicious, she saw familiar figures in the garden. The girl recognized them as Charlotte and Eric, who for some reason decided to meet. April assumed there was something between them, but then realized they were just looking for partners for the upcoming ball. The Duke nodded in agreement and said that if they went together, then Lady Lena and Mr. Daniel would also be paired. The girl admitted that she didn't expect everyone to pair up so quickly. She knew that if word got around, everyone would want to stay at their hotel and things would get even better. One morning, the heroine's personal maid knocked on her door. The maid knocked on the door and said that it was time for the mistress to wake up, but no one answered her. The girl opened the door and saw that the main character had already woken up and was rubbing her eyes. The main character answered the surprised maid that she had been waiting for this day for a long time, and that was why she woke up so early. It was necessary to start preparations as soon as possible, since today there was a ball at the Imperial Palace. The maid nodded in agreement and stated that Miss Saya had just brought her a dress. The heroine was surprised when she learned that the owner of the store she had been to last time had personally come to see her in the morning. The shop owner explained that although she had sent the girl all the dresses last time, she had made a new one and wanted to be the first to see the heroine in it. The main character was genuinely amazed when she saw the dress that was made for her. Seeing the main character's reaction, the store owner realized that all the sleepless nights were not in vain. The maid was intrigued by how the dress would look on the blonde, so she hurried to help her put it on. After some time, the girls saw the main character in a new dress and were amazed at how it looked on her. Saya was so amazed by the beauty of the main character that she fainted from admiration. Seeing that Sia had fainted, the girls were initially scared, but then decided that this was not a reason to refuse to prepare for the ball. The blonde wondered who to trust with her hair to do her hair for the ball. At that moment, two maids passed by the main character's room and saw that their mistress had put on a new dress. The blonde asked the maids which of them knew how to do hair and makeup, and Jaira replied that she could do it. But for some reason, the main character could not believe in Jaira's abilities. The main character had a feeling that the result would be different from what she imagined. The girl decided to try her luck with the second maid, Maureen, and asked her if she knew how to do hair. Maureen immodestly noted that she was a professional in all areas of activity, which encouraged the blonde. After some time, thanks to Maureen's help, the main character's hairstyle was ready. The main character praised the maid and said that she had real talent, but Maureen was not flattered by these words because she took her skills for granted. While the girls were admiring April, who looked especially dazzling today, the Duke entered the room. The Duke came to find out if the main character was ready to set off on her journey, but when he saw the girl, his words got stuck in his throat. The man approached the main character and sincerely stated that she looked very beautiful. April smiled and thanked the Duke, then complimented him back by saying that he had prepared well too. At that moment, April noticed the emerald box in the Duke's hands. April asked curiously why he had brought the box here, and the Duke replied that it was his gift to her. When April saw the necklace and earrings, she immediately guessed that they were worth a lot. April asked the man why he was giving her the necklace and earrings, and he replied that he thought they would suit her very well. At first, the Duke wanted to give her a piece of jewelry with green stones, but decided that it would look better with red ones. The blonde was very happy to receive the jewelry, but was afraid that they might be family heirlooms. The young man assured the blonde that she could accept the jewelry because he would spare nothing for her. The blonde was so beautiful that next to her, even the family jewels lost their shine. When the man asked the girl to accept the jewelry, she turned her back to him so that he could put it on. The main character realized how close they were when the man put the necklace on her. After the Duke helped her with the necklace, she asked the man to hand her the earrings so that she could put them on herself. The girl looked in the mirror and made sure that everything looked beautiful and harmonious. The young man admitted that her approval was a great relief for him. The main character extended his hand to the girl to accompany her to the ball. A few hours later, the main character complained to the Duke that the journey to the palace took too long. The girl added that it would be faster to use Fitzer's magic. The young man smiled and said that it was a mere formality, especially since they were almost there. When they entered, the worker suggested that Duke Fitzer and Countess Farkon enter separately, because there have never been any cases where married ladies were accompanied by unmarried partners. But the Duke was adamant and ordered the worker to announce that he and the Countess would enter together. After all, even if there have been no such cases before, this does not mean that it is prohibited. When their arrival was announced, the main character began to look around in surprise. The Duke looked back at the main character and, noticing her reaction, asked if she was worried. The Duke smiled encouragingly and asked the main character to trust him and follow him. As they walked around the room, people around them began to stare at them. Everyone was very surprised that the usually cold and distant Duke came with his partner. No one could have imagined that it would be none other than Countess Farkon herself. One of the girls was refused an invitation, so she thought that the blonde was so arrogant for a reason. Although they had a bad impression of the blonde, they couldn't deny the fact that she was stunningly beautiful. At that moment, they remembered that the Countess had married a man who had died tragically, and her beauty had not helped her. The main character, who had already begun to get irritated by the words of those around her, decided to draw their attention to her jewelry. As soon as the main character touched her neck, everyone immediately noticed her necklace and earrings. Those in the know immediately realized that this was the very ruby necklace that was passed down in the ducal family of Fitzers. Now everyone began to understand that the rumors were true, and that there really was something between the Duke and Countess Farkon. Someone remembered that the Marquis of Gotha's nephew might have tried to court the Countess, and the Duke was so angry that he reprimanded him. While the girl was rejoicing that after such rumors not a single stupid fly would dare to look down on her, someone's voice interrupted her thoughts. When the girl already thought that she would finally be able to live in peace, she saw that the great Countess Farkon had finally come to the ball. She smiled tensely and said that she had heard rumors that the great Countess was surviving by moving from one friend's house to another. The woman acted as if the main character had no right to be at the ball, which the main character did not like. The woman ignored her remark and asked the heroine why she didn't let her into the mansion. She suggested that the heroine was afraid to meet her after she had committed an offense. The blonde smiled and said that her mother-in-law must have gotten something mixed up, because if the heroine had been afraid of her, she wouldn't have behaved like that and wouldn't have come to the ball. The blonde added that she saw no reason to be afraid of this woman, and that the ban on coming to the mansion was the Countess's own mistake. The Countess angrily declared that the heroine talked a lot, but this did not affect the blonde. April, looking straight at the Countess, said that if she had not been approached, she would not have had to listen to it. The Countess decided that it was impossible to talk to the heroine, and tried to grab her by the hand to lead her out of the hall. The blonde slapped the Countess on the wrist and told her to say everything right there. The girl explained that if this is not something that cannot be said in front of others, then there is no point in leaving the room. The Countess saw that everyone around was watching them, and this made her feel uneasy. Feeling humiliated, the woman grabbed the heroine by the wrist and ordered her to follow her. At this moment, a young man who had been standing next to the main character all this time intervened. The young man grabbed the Countess by the hand and asked her to stop the scandal. With a gloomy expression on his face, the young man ordered the woman to take her hand away from the blonde. The woman tried to explain that she was confused and therefore did not immediately greet the Duke, but he did not pay attention to her. The young man's full attention was drawn to April, and he asked if she was hurt. People around also noticed that his lordship completely ignored the words of the Countess. Listening to the gossip, the woman with a gloomy expression asked Fitzer how he could support this girl. When she asked if he really loved the one who married her son, the Duke looked up dismissively and rolled his eyes. The Duke said that the lady had forgotten that she was at an official reception and was perhaps unable to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate words. Fitzer advised her to be careful with her words, as many eyes were directed at her. The Duke reminded her that if she wanted to return to high society, she should take care of her reputation. After the Duke put the Countess in her place, the blonde felt relieved. The blonde mentally praised the Duke for speaking to the point, and the lady had nothing to say in response. Meanwhile, the Duke continued to say that it would be better if they changed their place, rather than wait until the lady moved away. When the Duke turned to the blonde, his frown disappeared and he smiled and suggested that she go the other way. The blonde agreed that it would indeed be better this way, and turned to the Countess with a smile. The girl called the Countess mother and expressed hope that she would have a great time at the reception. The blonde thought she would die of fatigue, but now that she had knocked the Countess's arrogance down a notch, she would behave a little more quietly. While the main character thanked the Duke for his intervention, the people around her discussed the recent incident. The envious girls couldn't believe that the heroine spoke so rudely to her mother-in-law. Although they acknowledged the blonde's beauty, the girls thought it didn't matter if she had such a terrible and nasty character. The main characters heard others discussing them and felt irritated. The Duke didn't care when they talked about him, but when he heard the girls talking about April using some tricky tricks to attract a new beau, he decided to teach them a lesson. The Duke used magic to make the girls' hair tangled, and they ran out of the hall in panic to go to the restroom. The girls forgot about the main character because their thoughts were occupied with how not to disgrace themselves in front of the other aristocrats. The main character watched the girls escape and realized who was the reason for this. The main character laughed merrily and asked Lake if he was the one who had tangled the girl's hair. When the young man confirmed her assumption, the girl thanked him for his help. The young man smiled back and assured the girl that he was glad to help her. At that moment, it was announced that His Majesty the Emperor had arrived. The main character's eyes widened when she saw the one walking behind the Emperor. The heroine immediately recognized the young man as His Highness the Crown Prince. Not only was he a prince, he was also the main character of the original story and the one who killed April. While the girl was discouraged, the Emperor ordered everyone to raise their heads and greeted all those gathered. Just as the Emperor was saying he was glad to see everyone again this year, he began to have a coughing fit. The people around immediately became wary, as they understood the current situation and knew about the Emperor's poor health. The Emperor's son gestured to his subordinates to take his father out of the hall. Meanwhile, the ladies and gentlemen who were about to appear before the Emperor and Empress for the first time were asked to go into the next room with their attendants. Walking along with everyone else, the blonde wondered what she should do when the ball began. At this moment, the Duke was distracted by His Highness the Crown Prince. The prince quickly approached them and familiarly called the young man by name. He put his hand on the Duke's shoulder and noted with a smile that they had not seen each other for a long time. The Duke hesitated for a moment, but still greeted His Highness the Crown Prince. The blonde also greeted the prince, but he did not pay attention to her. The prince looked at the Duke and said that he was surprised to learn that the Duke had come to the ball on time, and with a partner too. The prince pretended it was a joke, but in reality he was mocking the Duke, and now the heroine understood why Lake was looking into the distance. At this point, the prince finally turned to the heroine and said that the rumors were true, and Countess Farkan was indeed beautiful. Suppressing her disgust, the girl thanked the prince for remembering her name. He was the character who killed her in the original, and he had a nasty personality, so she knew it was best not to look him in the eye or attract his attention. The prince insincerely expressed regret over the death of her husband, because he had been a reliable support even for the imperial family. The blonde awkwardly replied that if the count had heard His Highness's words, he would certainly have been flattered. The man assumed that the heroine knew him, but she admitted that she had never seen him before. The prince smiled and said sarcastically that it was precisely because she did not know him that the heroine could speak like that. The main character looked at the prince in surprise, not understanding why he started this conversation. The prince realized that he had crossed the line and decided to change the subject, saying that it did not matter now. The prince embraced the Duke and said that he was deeply grateful to the Countess for the fact that, thanks to her, Lake did not leave the ball early. Watching them, the girl thought that they were close friends. But then she remembered that this was not mentioned in the original work. The girl noticed that the prince was holding the young man tightly by the shoulder. The main character realized that this was a bad sign and took Lake's hand to help him free himself from the prince's influence. Lake said nothing, but his face showed relief. The prince looked at the main character as if he was going to kill her right then and there. Ignoring the prince's threatening gaze, the girl pressed herself against the Duke's shoulder and said that then she too should thank Lake. The prince asked her what she meant, and the girl replied that she was nervous because it was her first ball. While she was speaking, His Highness noticed that the Countess was calling the Duke by name. The girl apologized for her rudeness, explaining that she had called the Duke by his first name out of habit. His Highness smiled and said that he did not want to reproach the girl, but was simply interested. The prince looked closely at the young people again and admitted that he simply thought that they were very close. The main character was tense, thinking that the prince still suspected their relationship. April gave the protagonist a tense smile, urging him to show at least some emotion. When the young man saw her expression, he finally understood what she wanted to tell him. The young man smiled tenderly at the main character, which made them a harmonious couple. Watching them, His Highness couldn't help but comment that it looked rather saccharine. Then he muttered darkly that it would be better to have romance than any nonsense. The main character heard His Highness's muttering as she was nearby and stared at him questioningly. But the main character did not have time to understand the situation because an assistant approached the prince and informed him about the need for his intervention. After listening to his assistant, the prince turned to the young man and said that it was time for him to go. When the prince wished the countess a good time, she thanked him for his concern. After this, the young people silently watched His Highness leave. As soon as the prince left, the blonde sighed with relief, thinking that her heart was about to jump out of her chest. When the Duke noticed her confident tone, the girl explained that she had acted decisively in order to avoid getting into trouble and stay alive. The Duke did not understand what the girl meant, since the prince, although an unpleasant person, did not kill for the slightest mistake. In the original, Ashlot actually kills April, so the heroine tried to stay in the shadows but did not suspect that he was close to Lake. The girl remembered how the prince held the Duke tightly and decided to find out from Lake what kind of relationship he had with the crown prince. The Duke decided to be honest and told the girl that the prince needed him, but he himself did not want to deal with him. Seeing the complex expression on the Duke's face, the girl realized that there was a tense relationship between them. The young man agreed with her and added that this relationship only caused a headache, nothing more and nothing less. According to the Duke, this meant that the prince was in a more dependent position. Therefore, the girl believed that if the prince needed the help of the main character, then he could have been softer, not grabbing him by the shoulder. The Duke refuted her words and explained that a prince does not have a dependent position and he is only interested in what will happen sooner or later. April wanted to ask what he meant, but the Duke changed the subject and asked if she was hungry. There was still some time before the first dance, so the young man asked the girl to wait where she was so he could bring her something to drink. The main character nodded in agreement and asked to also bring her something sweet, if possible. While the main character was wondering about the connection between Lake's secret and the crown prince, she overheard people talking about the emperor's second wife, who was also the main character of the original, whom Ashlot was obsessed with.